You are listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Radio Hour podcast. I'm Justin Beahm. This episode is going to be a big one, and it's really close to my heart. I've been an Alice Cooper fan as long as I can remember, and I've had the good fortune to interview him a number of times for magazines, for different video releases. Anytime he comes anywhere near me, he always gets me passes to go see him live, which has happened a bunch. My son has met him, and he's just a really big part of my world, I guess you could say. What you're going to hear today are raw interviews that I've done over time. The first of which is a career-spanning discussion that ended up running in Fangoria years ago, where we cover all sorts of territory. I mean, it's incredibly insightful. We touch on pretty much every on-screen appearance he's ever had. We talk about his sobriety and how the film Monster Dog, of all things, was his sort of proving ground that he could work sober and how important that was to him. It really is a very candid discussion about all elements of the work he's done and friendships he's had. I'm a huge Doors fan, and we talk about Jim Morrison and Alice hanging out with him. Got a couple crazy stories from that time. And then after this first interview bit, I'm going to be playing interviews with some people from Alice's world, people who have worked with him, because I initially planned to have a sidebar story that would accompany the main feature in that issue, but they just didn't have enough real estate for me. So these interviews went nowhere. They never did see print. This is pretty wild. You're going to hear from Rachel Talalay, who directed Alice as Freddy Krueger's dad in Freddy's Dead. You're going to hear from Rob Stefaniuk, who's the director of the film Suck, and you're going to hear from Jake the Snake Roberts. If anyone out there is a wrestling fan, and especially a Wrestlemania aficionado, you'll know that at Wrestlemania 3, Alice Cooper accompanied Jake to the ring. Jake was facing off with the Honky Tonk Man at that event. And this was the WrestleMania 3 where it had the big Andre Hogan match that has gone down in wrestling lore, where Andre kind of passed the torch in a way to Hogan, even though I don't think Andre was champion at the time. I can't remember, but Hogan's big slam of Andre was a real moment for the company, for wrestling as a whole. But for me, the most exciting thing at that pay-per-view is seeing Alice come out. He did an interview backstage prior to the match with Jake. And then when they got to the ring, Alice grabbed Damien, Jake's big snake, and was chasing people around with it. Jake has some funny stories about that, and Alice talks about it too in the interview. So after those interviews, we're going to get into a discussion where I talk with Alice basically just about his horror movie work. So Prince of Darkness and Monster Dog are front and center there. And we talk about some other things, like his interest in the genre, and that covers more ground. And then the final interview that you're going to hear was with Alice for the Friday the 13th box set. This was during COVID, and so we talk a little bit about that and what his world was like during this period. And then, of course, we talk about He's Back, The Man Behind the Mask, which was his song in one of a couple songs that he had in Friday the 13th, Jason Lives. And then Alice made a tremendous video for that too, directed by Jeffrey Abelson, who was a pioneer in the world of music videos. He's behind so many of the early, really iconic music videos. And they teamed up for this promotional video, He's Back, that was very heavily played on MTV when it first landed. And I think it really helped cement Jason Lives as the rock and roll Friday the 13th. It's one of the great metal movies of all time. Many people think it's the best Friday the 13th film of all time. And I think this music video and Alice's involvement had a lot to do with that. So at the end of that, you're going to hear an interview with Jeffrey Abelson on shooting the video, on working with Alice, and how that whole thing came together. And then we'll wrap it up on the other side. So this is the perfect time of year to celebrate Alice and all that he's done. He he really transcends music. He transcends film. He's still touring pretty much every year. He's out there on the road, still releasing albums. He was in a celebrated musical version on TV of Jesus Christ Superstar, where he got a standing ovation from the audience as soon as he walked out on stage. So, I mean, this guy has really done it all, from The Muppet Show, partnerships, friendships with Vincent Price, and so many others. And I hope you find this as entertaining as you will insightful, a true celebration of Alice and my love for him. So head to justinbeahm.com and you can keep up on all the latest releases and news relating to video stuff, magazines that I'm in, interviews. This time of year always gets pretty heavy with podcast appearances and stuff. So that's all there at justinbeahm.com. So without further ado, let's dive into this Alice Cooper mega episode. I hope you enjoy, and we'll talk to you on the other side.
Hey, Justin.
Hi, Alice. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Great. Thank you for taking some time out for us today. We're really excited
No problem at all.
to get you on board here. How's the tour going?
Everything's good. We're in Germany right now. It's just starting to get too cold to play golf. So it's all Christmas shopping now.
That's your addiction in the off season. Right?
It is. If there's no golf involved, then I'm going to go out and walk the streets.
So I understand that you collect horror films. You consider them one of your addictions as an all-in guy, you say?
Well, it's since I was 6 years old in Detroit, every Saturday, our parents, there would be 10 of us, 10 kids, all the same age, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we'd get dropped off at the Easttown movie theater in the morning, and there would be 3 movies that day. There would be The Creature from the Black Lagoon, It Came from Outer Space, and, It Came from Beneath the Sea. Mm-hmm. And that was every single weekend, so we would spend all day watching the really classic black and white horror movies. And, to say it was fun, it was always fun because, you wanted to see if it was going to scare you or not.
Yeah.
And then, the movies progressed and got into this and got into that. Always followed them, got into the slasher movies and everything. And I just always stayed in it. I always kind of stayed in it and knew who everybody was. I knew who the Dario Argentos were and all the Savinis and all the people that worked in the movies. Mm-hmm. And was very surprised when every once in a while I'd see one that I'd go, wow, that was different.
Yeah.
What are a
few of those?
It's
really
just one of those things where, now I watch them, and Rob Zombie and I watch most of the movies and sit there and realize that the more blood that there is, the funnier it gets. Yeah. It becomes so over the top. In fact, I remember, I think maybe the first time I realized that was watching Evil Dead Part, I guess it was 1 or 2, when I said, there can't be any more blood in this movie. And right as I said that, he hits one of the pipes down the basement, and he gets covered. And I just started laughing. And I just started laughing, going, this is really hysterical.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Who were some of your favorite stars or the icons as a kid?
Well, like anybody else, we grew up with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney, those were the greats, And then after that, I think that there were a lot of guys it was almost like music. There were classic movies, and then there were classic rock stars. Then there were a lot of newcomers that came along and did moments of brilliance and then disappeared.
Yeah.
It just seemed like they were I'd find a little movie, a little Italian vampire movie somewhere, or just something that nobody had ever seen before, and I'd go, what is this? This time I saw Suspiria.
Yeah.
I found a little classic right here.
Oh.
This is a classic. I'll tell you one that got me that I was totally surprised at. Christmas morning, I'm watching a movie made for TV called Salem's Lot.
Mm-hmm. Toby Hooper, yeah.
So, yeah. And I sat there and I went, well, this is going to be, made David Soul. How scary could this be? And James Mason. And it goes on for 2 hours, and they keep talking about Barlow, Mr. Barlow, Mr. Barlow. And then the scene when Barlow shows up and his whole face covers the screen, and it literally stopped my heart for a second because I wasn't expecting it. And here was this character that was a personification of evil.
Yeah.
And I just went, oh. And I went, this is great. And I actually realized how good that movie was.
Yeah.
I mean, with the kids floating outside, scratching on the window.
Oh, that's one I'll never forget. That scene.
And the guy in the rocking chair.
Yeah.
You know, teacher, come here, teacher. I said, this movie is truly scary.
Yeah.
I said, this is a really good, scary movie. And it really was. It was very well done. I always tell people that's one of my top 5 horror movies of all time.
We all have kind of go-to horror films like that. What else would be in your list of that? I mean,
I would say, that one, I would say the original Haunting.
Ooh, yeah.
With Julie Harris.
Absolutely.
Was really a well-done horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
Suspiria, I would say, would be one of them.
Yeah.
Because it's so off the wall. It's just so far, it just, what is this?
I love Argento.
It's so out there. I don't think you can ever take The Exorcist out of the list of top 5 best horror movies, only because it doesn't it doesn't attack your intellect at all. It attacks your soul. It makes you think. It goes past, am I scared? It goes into this level of, that could be me.
Yeah.
And there's something really terrifying about that.
Yeah.
The fact that this, possession, demon possession goes back as far as the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just something somebody made up. Anybody can look at Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers and those, and go, great fun characters. But there's nothing fun about, Pazuzu.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not a fun guy.
Yeah. So, if what I'd like to do here is take a little different approach to a few questions. In film, characters evolve from treatment to script, and they're finally fleshed out in the hands of the actor.
Right.
I'd like to talk about the character of Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
Considering the treatment stage of Alice Cooper, what was the original concept, and how would you describe sort of the skeleton that was the beginning of Alice?
I think Alice started out being, when I finally decided to hide behind a character, which was what I really did as a lead singer. I could have been a lead singer all the rest of my life in a band, and I went as far as that could go. Mm-hmm. And I finally realized that it would be, why not create a character? There is no villain in rock and roll. I couldn't think of one villain in rock and roll, and I said, well, I'll gladly be the Captain Hook to all these Peter Pans, because we need one.
Yeah.
And I was not built to be a hero. I didn't look like a hero. I wasn't the pretty boy. I was Basil Rathbone, and I said, well, I can definitely play that guy.
Yeah.
So I created the makeup. But I look and I notice even the character, there's 2 of him. There was the early Alice, who was an alcoholic Alice, and his posture was always bent over. He was the whipping boy. He was the guy that all of the outcasts in rock and roll looked to as being their hero. Mm-hmm. He was the guy that was the outcast.
Right.
And the black sheep of everything. Then when I quit drinking, I totally realized that that Alice didn't live anymore. What was this new Alice going to be? I was sober. I felt great. And I said, then why shouldn't Alice feel great? Why shouldn't Alice be a villain now, but be a really arrogant Alan Rickman type of villain? Mm-hmm. Why shouldn't Alice be arrogant and conceited and condescending and overblown and sadistic, but have a good sense of humor?
Yeah.
There's a gentleman thing about Alice that's kind of interesting. The fact that he would slit your throat, but he would never swear at you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, and he might do something totally horrible to you, but he might slip on a banana peel the next second. So there's a little Clouseau in him too. You know,
absolutely.
There's that moment where he could totally look really cool, and the next second look like a total idiot.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't mind that about him, but I do talk about Alice in the third person. My kids, we would sit and watch. You know, if Alice Cooper would come on in a video, the kids would always say, "Hey, look, there's Alice Cooper."
Yeah.
They never said, "Look, there's Daddy."
Yeah.
You know, so they understood that I played Alice Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always said to myself, if Alice Cooper is not my favorite rock star, there's something wrong. Because I get to go outside of him, and I get to say, okay, now what would I want my favorite rock star to do, or what would I want him to wear, or what would I want him to sing about, or what would I want him to look like? And that's how I designed Alice.
That's great. And then
so Alice is my favorite rock star.
That's great. So
and that's third person. I mean, really, I look at Jagger and I go, wow, he's great. I look at Freddie Mercury and I go, yeah, he's great. But I look at Alice and I see the full package of what I would want my rock star to be.
And then the script stage of the character was when Bob Ezrin came in and sort of gave things a focus. How did Alice evolve at that point when Bob stepped into the picture?
I think you really have to look at Bob Ezrin as being the the real Spielberg of Alice. Real sort of George Martin. He took all the raw stuff that was there and put it into form. Mm-hmm. We would come in with a song that was a really good song, but it wasn't Alice. And Bob would sit there as an outsider and go, my idea of Alice is this. And he would add this classical bit to it. And it would suddenly make total sense. And I immediately got it that Bob Ezrin was the missing element in Alice. That he was the one that was going to make it sound great on the radio. He was the one that was going to give it class. And he really did. He brought in the very classical sort of, way of looking at things. He would put a cello where a guitar should have been. And then put a guitar over that. He would do all the things that we wouldn't ever have thought of doing. And yet, when Bob and I would sit and write lyrics, I'd write a lyric, and he would go, I don't think Alice would say that. And I would look at it and go, you're right, he wouldn't. So we could write outside of Alice and write for this character, because I always had to remind myself, I'm not writing this for me. I wouldn't say that at all, but Alice would say that, yeah.
That must have brought great freedom for you to have. Oh,
it's in every different way. When I first started, when I went to L.A., I was the lead singer in the Nas, we were called, and then we became Alice Cooper. And there was no Alice Cooper. The whole band was called that. And then people just called me Alice because I was the convenient one. I looked like I was the lead singer, so I must be Alice.
Sure.
And then it got to the point of that band just kept getting more and more theatrical without trying to. We just were that. And we couldn't help ourselves from being theatrical.
Yeah.
Even when we were trying not to be, we were.
Yeah.
And so Bob saw that, and he brought all that out. So, yeah, he was the guy. He was the missing link.
And then after after Alice sort of came into his own as a character, over the years there are distinct periods that usually sort of coincide with an album where Alice evolved. And this was as you were going through addiction, all these changes musically, you were riding along with the styles and things. Were you always searching for an evolution in the character over the years?
Well, the only thing that I kept consistent, I think, was the sense of humor and the fact that almost every album was a guitar-oriented rock album. The one thing, even with Flush the Fashion, had the same sense of humor, and Dada, and all these albums I don't remember writing. I don't remember writing Special Forces.
Wow. Or
Zipper Catches Skin. And it's amazing that those albums exist. They end up being my the fan core's favorite albums for some reason. But honestly, I don't remember writing a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't remember touring with it or anything until, I was in pretty much a blackout. But now I look back at it and I really kind of enjoy it. I listen to it. I go, geez, what was I thinking?
Were Vince and Alice blurred at that time? Were you having a hard time
there was a point when I didn't know where Alice began and where Vince ended. And that was when I was drinking, and I was kind of at that point where I was growing up. My big brothers were Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix and, Janis Joplin and Keith Moon, and these were all the guys that I was out with every night trying to keep up with them.
Right.
And when I saw them all die at 27 years old, I sat there and I had to realize, well, my character is even going to be more pronounced than theirs, more defined. So I've got to find a way to be me and Alice. And when I finally got sober, I really realized that Alice stays on stage. He doesn't want to live in this world. He doesn't want to have a house. He doesn't want to have a car. He doesn't want to play golf. He doesn't want to do anything that I love to do. He is built for one thing, and that is to perform for that audience. And when the curtain goes up, there he is. When the curtain goes down, he's gone. Because, he really knows his place. He never interferes in my life, and I never interfere in his life. Which is we have a really good relationship now. Well, there was a time when I didn't know, am I supposed to go to the rock club tonight with a snake because I don't want to let anybody down? I'm not Alice Cooper lives in a big black. I finally get to the point of just being honest and saying, look, if you ever get on Alice's stage, you're in a lot of trouble. If you ever encounter the real Alice on stage, I don't know, I can't honestly guarantee your life.
Yeah.
But off stage, I'm the easiest guy in the world to get along with. I'll sign any autograph, I'll take pictures, I'll talk to you for hours about anything.
Yeah.
But I said, honestly, if you get on stage, Alice might just take a swing at you with a sword and take an arm off. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can only tell you that he does have temper tantrums up there.
What have you tried over the years with Alice that didn't work? Is there anything that you think wasn't a success?
Oh, when you're in the business of Alice Cooper or Marilyn Manson or Kiss or anybody that's highly theatrical, we have classic Spinal Tap moments. Because, when I saw Spinal Tap, I went, everything in this movie has happened to me. There were times when we had rehearsed something that went on and on and on, and it looked so good on rehearsal. And then you got it in front of an audience, and it just died. And then something accidental would happen. Somebody would fall over an amp at exactly the right moment, and the audience would get a huge reaction. And I'd look at that, and I'd say, that third song where you fell over your amp? Yeah, do it again.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah.
They love that. Or if you intentionally, one night I would take my top hat and I would throw it up, and my drummer would catch it on the stick.
Yep.
And it worked 35 times in a row.
Yeah.
The 36th time he missed it. The audience kind of looked at me, and then I threw it back. He missed it again. The third time he caught it, the audience went crazy. And I said, okay, from now on you miss it. I said, because they love it better when you finally get it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was just one of those things that you don't really realize that, you figure that it has to work every time. It doesn't have to.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, yeah. So, okay, let's look at sort of the screen stage of Alice, which is Alice today. How is this incarnation of the character different than any before?
I think the only thing I miss is being nervous. I'm never nervous anymore. I know exactly what's going to happen. Like I said, I'm a creature of total rehearsal. I love things rehearsed, even though the funniest thing is sometimes somebody will say, why don't we try this, this, and this? And I'll go, okay, let's try it cold, though. Let's try it without rehearsing it, which is me coloring outside the lines a little bit.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the idea that there's something going to happen that night on stage that I'm not sure of.
A little danger.
Yeah, and I like that. It used to be that every night I would be nervous about going on stage because I wasn't sure of the Alice character. I am so sure of it now that I wish I could get nervous. You know, so now, yeah, I think that it's second nature for me. In fact, I feel more comfortable on stage or even filming than I do off stage.
Do you find that
it's just a natural thing for me to either be, you know, with a mic in front of me or a camera in front of me.
Yeah. Oh, well, you spent your entire, most of your
yeah,
life.
Really, honestly, yeah, I've gotten so much positive feedback from being under that situation that I think I actually, Alice is born sometimes out of fear. That here's an audience, you're out here, this better be good.
I bet Johnny
I force it to be good, yeah.
I bet Johnny Carson was scary. I mean, talk about some shoes to fill when you took the seat.
Well, I'll tell you what, Johnny was the best. He was the best in the business. He would make you feel like he was you were his best friend. You never ever felt nervous ever doing that show. It was just sort of like, you know, getting up there. And to me, having a talk show would be the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
You know, that would be my world right there. I could do that really easily. I think it would get boring after a while. You know, I think unless you got really creative behind it.
Yeah.
I don't know how he did it that many years. I think all the comedy bits that he created was what really he was looking forward to. Mm-hmm. The Karnaks and all those characters that he brought up. I think that's why he did the show, was to play those characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
He made everybody feel so comfortable, you know.
I think that you and Buddy Rich are two great examples of, I think no one knew what to expect of you when you landed on the show. But you know, the audience immediately warmed up to you, and then of course you're asked to come back again and all that.
Well, I think what it was all they knew of Alice was this urban horror stories.
Yeah.
And that everybody was, you know, terrified, and everybody this and that. And then when you get on the show and you're funny, and you can actually come back with something funny really quick, then they go, oh, there's another dimension. You know, oh, this is a different thing now. So, I mean, yeah, that was that sort of like a second stage of the rocket there that really got me into a lot of other places.
Yeah, you were great on there. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing was that I think the oddest thing in the world was that I was embraced by the Friars Club. Now, the Friars Club was the Milton Berles, the George Burns, the Groucho Marxes. When I was at my most dastardly, here was the most, you know, the legends that worked their way up from vaudeville into the, you know, into everybody in the whole country knew who they were.
Yeah.
And they were all huge Alice fans. And I think it was because of the fact that they saw Alice as a vaudevillian character.
Absolutely.
And to me, I was immediately accepted by those guys. And it was funny, with Steve Allens and people like that. I was like a common guest with them because of the fact they said, well, Alice can handle himself in a talk situation. He can be funny, and he's still scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So what was your relationship like with Vincent Price?
Oh, Vincent Price was great because, you know, I didn't know what to expect. I was a big Vincent Price fan. Of course, you know, I grew up with all of the great Vincent Price movies.
Yeah.
And when Bob said, we've got this vocal thing here we need a spider curator for the Spider Museum in Welcome to My Nightmare. And I started thinking, who's got the most distinctive voice in the business? Of course, Boris Karloff wasn't with us anymore, neither was Bela Lugosi. And immediately I said, man, if we could get Vincent Price, that would be such a coup. We called him, and he said, of course. And I went, what? I was actually really nervous with him coming down to read this bit that I had written.
Aww.
You know, this sort of prelude to to this Black Widow spider thing.
Yeah.
And he comes in and seemed to know all about us. And I mean, I told him, I said, hey, I got to tell you, I'm in awe. The fact that you're here, I said, you're such a living legend.
How neat.
You know, and everything. And he says, okay, are we past that now? What is this bit about the Black Widow spider? You know, and then he says, can I rewrite some of this? And I said, please do.
Wow.
You know, and he rewrote some of it. And then I said, now I'm going to ask you the big one. I said, we're doing this in Tahoe, first night. We're going to open like off-Broadway in Tahoe. Would you do it on stage with me? And he goes, absolutely. And so I had him for 2 nights on stage doing the curator thing. And we also did it on video. We did it in the Nightmare in Toronto, where I got to work with him for 5 days. And this guy was just, I think I learned so much from him, and the fact that you could be scary and be personable and be nice and be way past the character. And I learned that, I was already a pretty nice guy, but I realized that the nicer you are, the better you're going to get along in this business.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think I learned that from Vincent Price.
And what was your rapport like? Was he...
Oh, it was great. We sat and talked about old movies. We talked about rock and roll. He loved to cook. So every time he got a chance, he would, he'd go in the kitchen. And one night he made us vodka and caviar crepes. And I mean, it was really, he was a great gourmet cook. And his wife was the most acid tongue. She was the best. She was this British lady that was just so acidic, but funny.
Yeah.
Sort of like a John Cleese almost. He told me, he says, one night we were coming out of a Broadway, of a play in the West End, and somebody came up to her, and he says, please, he says, I haven't eaten for a week. And she said, well, really, you must force yourself. And, of course, Vincent Price gave him 10 pounds, But the fact that she was very, very quick. She was very funny.
That was a great impression, by the way.
Yeah. You really must force yourself.
So have you met any other famous monsters over the years? Did you ever get a chance to meet any of your other sort of cinema heroes?
There was a lot of them. Christopher Lee is great guy, really terrific guy. I got to meet the Savinis, and Romero's and a lot of directors. A lot of the movie stars just kind of died, before I got to really meet them.
Yeah.
I know all of the new guys. I know the Jeffrey Combs, he's been in every great, He's really a funny, versatile actor. And a lot of those guys. And of course, knowing Rob Zombie has a real love for the character actor.
Yeah.
Where you see like a Danny Trujillo.
Or Brett Dora.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he's a romantic lead.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
I just saw him a couple of nights ago. He came to one of our shows, and I said, wait a minute, Danny, Jessica Alba? And he goes, I'm a leading man now.
That's great. And you just recently met Romero, right?
Yeah, Romero came to 2 of our shows, actually. Great guy, always laughing. And who else was there? 2 or 3 guys came that night, and I'm drawing a blank on who was there. Romero showed up, and Bradley Pinhead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was there, and who was the guy that played Warlock? He was boxing Helena
Sands.
Yeah, Julian Sands.
Julian. Yep.
Yeah, he was there. And they all came to see the show, and they loved it because of the fact that it did have its moments of horror and it had its moments of comedy in it.
Sure.
So they totally got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those were guys, and I worked a lot with Wes Craven and John Carpenter, and those were guys that I knew that I'd worked professionally with. So.
Sure.
But all of those guys are always laughing, and that's what I love about horror directors. Is that they're the guys that are probably laughing harder than anybody.
That's great. Yeah. Speaking of famous monsters that you've known, who is darker or scarier and why? Elvis Presley or Jim Morrison?
Well, the more you learn about Elvis, I think it was the fact that Elvis was more guarded.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like what I think maybe the scariest human being ever in America was probably J. Edgar Hoover.
Mm-hmm.
When you start realizing, what his pastimes were. He's the guy that was the head of all law enforcement, and he was also a drag queen.
Yeah, yeah.
How weird is that?
Right.
The toughest guy was in a dress when he wasn't, wearing a three-piece suit.
Right.
How weird is that?
Yeah.
To me, that is weirder than any horror monster. It takes me back because I know horror monsters guys are paid to play these characters, and they're really good at it.
Yeah.
Dark, Jim Morrison was he was self-destructive. He was self-destructive on a way that you could never talk him out of. His goal was to somehow die in some romantic way. Well, in a bathtub in Paris.
Yeah.
Okay. Elvis, I think the more we learn about Elvis's little idiosyncrasies, the weirder that gets. But still, I think that if you were going to pick one guy that was the weirdest, it would be J. Edgar Hoover.
That's great. That's great. Well, and you had that sort of crazy Elvis story about when he called you into the bedroom and he was showing.
Well, I think Elvis was a tragic character in the fact that he never. I think that it was very weird that a guy that big had no say over what his life was. And that was the weird part of it. You'd think that at some point he would stand up and say, hey, I can go do what I want to do. He never did that. The Colonel totally owned him. He couldn't go out and do anything because, the Colonel basically had some kind of strange power over him.
Yeah. What's your best Morrison story about the years that you guys were hanging out?
Oh, man, there were so many things. There was, I was in a car one time in the front seat, and he was in the back seat with his girlfriend in the Laurel Canyon. And I'm talking, if I turn around, he's gone. We turned the corner, and he jumped out of the car and rolled all the way down Topanga Canyon. And we kind of stopped and backed up, and here he comes walking up the thing, and I'm going, what are you doing? He said, I always wanted to do that. And I just kind of went, okay. There was another time at a party at the 8,000 building, I think, on Doheny and Sunset. Now, picture this, okay? This is Light My Fire, the biggest band in the world probably at the time.
Yeah.
There's a ledge there where it's an 8-story drop to Sunset Boulevard. He's walking on the edge like a tightrope, with a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a bottle of vodka on the other hand as a balancing thing, toe to heel, heel to toe, and he's already so out of it that one breeze and he's dead. And nobody is pulling him out.
That's incredible.
His record company, nobody is going, Jim, get off the thing. And I'm standing there and going, Jim, come over here. I said, come on, let's get a drink. And I'm sitting there looking at his guy. What are you guys doing? I said, one little trip and he's going to fall off the building.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was weird.
Everyone was so reckless with him as he was reckless with himself.
Well, I think his band, I don't think any of his band were there at the time. Or they would have jumped and wouldn't let him up there because, the band took care of him.
Yeah.
Robbie and those guys, they watched out for him. But this was just Jim on his own up there. And I'm just sitting there going, is everybody here crazy? Or is this a bad dream or what?
Was it the same way with you? Were you, when you were at your height of self-destruction?
No, I always had people around me. There was always people around me. There was Shep and my manager, and I always had I always had a guy that worked for me that was my assistant, and I wasn't stupid. I never did things like that. The dumbest thing I ever did was it was with Jim Morrison. It was in an old theater. We were hanging from a balcony. If we would have fallen, we might have broken a leg.
Yeah.
Okay, but we wouldn't have died. And I'm hanging, and it was one of those, let's see who can hang the longest. off of this thing. And we were both pretty much, past a couple of bottles. And, at the time it seemed like a good idea. And pretty soon somebody grabbed our and pulled us both up. But, one of us was going to drop because the other one wasn't going to give up.
Oh, that's funny. And, of course, it had to be him. It had to be him.
They pulled us up. So nobody knows who would have won that one.
Yeah.
But to this day, I can't remember where that was. I can't remember how we got up there. And I just barely remember it.
Mm.
But somebody had to remind me of that.
Wow.
And I went, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. In fact, it was one of the doors. One of the doors, I think it was Robbie Krager, said, I remember the time when you guys were hanging from the balcony. And I went, gosh, I totally forgot about that.
We talked about you being a natural presence on camera and on stage. When did you decide, or was it ever a conscious effort to try to branch out into acting? Was that a focus for you at any point?
I think it was almost one of those. I just kept walking out on that ice, and I didn't know how thin it was getting. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I should be able to do this. I can stage act. I can learn how to film act if you just kind of give me the basics here.
Yeah.
And really the whole difference is in stage acting and film acting is that you make smaller moves in film. Because you're bigger on the screen, so you don't have to make. I'm so used to stage acting where I have to make big moves because there's somebody 300 rows back. In order to make them understand what I'm doing, I've got to make big pantomime kind of moves. When I first started film acting, I had directors going, no, bring it back, bring it way back, because you're not on stage now. You're in front of this camera, and when you see this on film, if you just move your thumb an inch, it's going to look like 3 feet. And I went, okay, I get it. So I really had to learn how to really understate things in film acting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's a point then when they say, okay, now go for it, when you want to make big moves. But, it really was interesting, some of the difference between film and stage acting.
Yeah, yeah. To start addressing your film, what I've done is I've picked out the more genre-related or some of the bigger appearances for you. The Nightmare in 1975, we briefly talked about you working with Vincent on that. That was actually, honestly, a pretty revolutionary thing that you were doing with that. What was it like with that production there? We were feeling it out as we went. Honestly, I didn't know there were no rules. I didn't know what the rules were. All I knew was, this is the song. This is what the stage looks like. This is what the song is. I'm just going to do what Alice would do naturally here. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, we'd get done with a cut, and I'd go, I just thought of something. It would be better if Alice was closer to the carousel or something where he was like singing to the horse on the carousel somehow, mm-hmm. or something like that. And then we would shoot it again. And we just got the best sort of both. Nobody really knew what they were doing. And maybe that's why it worked. Yeah.
There was no real acting formula going on. I just kind of did what the song suggested,
Pure Alice.
Which is different from when you're acting with a director and you're playing Freddy Krueger's father or something. Then they say, okay, you're a Southern, horrible Southern father that beats his kids, and mm-hmm. you're an alcoholic, and
mm-hmm.
And I say, okay, that's all I need to know. Give me my lines.
Well, and then a couple years later, and this is, I think, from my memory, where I met you, and I think you know where I'm going with this, is the Muppet Show in 1978.
Oh, and that was again working with the real pros. You're working with Frank Oz, and you're working with Jim Henson, and we just had a ball, Jim. I never had so much fun in my life doing anything as that, because. But the odd thing about it was that you find yourself buying into these characters, these puppets.
Yeah.
Because they never lose character. When you're rehearsing with Kermit, you're rehearsing with a guy's hand. Mm. But you forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm talking to Miss Piggy, we would finish the song or the thing, and I would go, hey, you know what would be great? And she'd go, what? And she'd look at me and shake her head, yes. And I'd say, if you put your head on my shoulder, on this one line, it would be really, you know,
yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea and everything. And I realize I'm talking to this hand.
How surreal.
I should be talking to the guy down there that's controlling the hand, but you don't. You end up talking to the character.
Yeah.
And they respond to you and talk back to you. And it is the weirdest thing that when you're rehearsing with Kermit, you're rehearsing with a frog.
It was really
I
bold.
never once looked down at the guy, at Jim Henson. I always just talked to the frog.
Yeah, yeah. It was really bold of them to have you on that show. And then there was the running sketch with, or the sort of the storyline about the
Faust.
Yeah, Faust and the souls and all. I mean, that's pretty heady stuff for a kid's show.
Well, you know, it was, but, you know, I looked at, when they asked me to do the show, I looked at it and I went, I can't do this. You know, I'm the scariest guy in the world right now. And, you know, I had all these, you know, glorioso thoughts about how grand I was. And then I looked at who was just on the show. It's Christopher Lee, Vincent Price, John Cleese, Peter Sellers. And I went, yes, of course I'll do it. Having no idea what they wanted me to do, but I got there in total faith that they made those other guys look great. When I got there, the script was funny, trying to get Kermit to sell his soul, and me having to answer the phone to the other guy. I think I got him. You know, it was very funny. Yeah,
it was wonderful. Yeah, did they have all the sets dressed for you, or did you show up?
Oh
with some of your own
yeah.
spooky?
Honestly, it was Alice Cooper week then. You know, everybody there was from New York. It was a funny thing. We did it in London, but everybody on the cast was from New York.
Huh.
So I felt right at home. You know, I mean, all these guys were New York guys.
Yeah.
And when we went through the rehearsals and we went through the dance rehearsals, and it was like a full week of a lot of work. And then when we finally started filming it, it was really comfortable. It was a lot of fun to do.
You look comfortable on screen. I mean, you look. It was just the way you fit into that environment was.
And they realized when you could make fun of yourself, they were going to have a great time with you.
Yeah.
You know, if you had no problem making fun of the Alice character, then they were going to really have fun.
Yeah. So, your largest leading role to date is 1984 as Vince Raven in Monster Dog. How did this come to be? I'm going to ask you a few questions because this is your biggest role here. Okay, now this was something that was. I mean, I was so out of my comfort zone on this, but the deal was this. I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I told Shep, I've got to find something that I can prove to myself that I can work sober. I was, the first time sober. I had never done a concert sober. I had never done anything. And I said, and he says, what if we take a movie? And I said, let's find a movie somewhere where, it was in Spain. We shot it in Spain. And they promised me they would only release it in the Philippines, that kind of thing. So I knew I had to be up every morning at 7. I had to know my lines. I had to film every day. And I was the romantic lead, which is weird for me. I mean, I was playing the Clint Eastwood part. Yeah.
I just kind of went, this is so out of my game that I really kind of challenged myself to do this. And, I said, I want to make the kind of movie that I like to rent. It's really a great C movie. Mm-hmm. I don't like A movies, B movies. I said, I want to do a really good C movie where there's so much blood in it. It's just stupid. And the storyline is stupid. And, but I still got to act. You still got to know your lines.
Yeah.
And that's what this was. I actually, for 2 months, had to wake up every morning, be on the set at 7 o'clock, know my lines, and do it sober. And it worked. I mean, I'm very proud to say that I am in 2 of the all-time greatest turkeys. Monster Dog is one of them, and Sergeant Pepper is in the other one. So I can actually say, and I watched the movie. Oh, and here's the kicker to the whole thing. We get done with the movie. Everybody in the cast is British or American.
Yeah.
When we get the print back from the movie, everybody's been overdubbed.
Oh, yeah.
Like my voice was some truck driver from Barcelona.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on over there with that? Oh, you got to come here with that. And I went, and I started laughing so hard when I first heard it. I said, what is going on? They overdubbed everybody in broken English.
Oh.
No, it was great. I watched it, and I was just having such a ball watching it because I said, this is just horrible. I love it.
That's wonderful. Was there a language barrier during the shoot with those
No,
guys?
no. Everybody was, I mean, all he had to show me was these are the dogs, don't move because it might rip your face off.
Yeah.
And they really were. I mean, they had a dog wrangler there, and a few of the dogs were not good dogs at all. Mm. But it really was a storyline. I had to know what the script was. I had to know what what I was going to do. I was going to blow this guy's head off at this point. Mm. They were going to chase me through this mansion. I had a shotgun. Mm. But it was hysterical. I mean, honestly, I had a great time, but I did prove that I could work without alcohol. And after that, then I started touring again.
Oh, that's wonderful. And there was
that movie actually was, as bad as it was a turning point for me.
Hmm. And the music in the film, sort of your return to recording at the same time, the music was very different from what people were used to hearing from Alice.
Yeah, and it was like a French composer. And I said, what kind of songs do you need? And they said, we need something that is going to be kind of vampirish and everything. So I wrote the See Me in the Mirror, mm-hmm. if you want to. In other words, I might not be in the mirror, but you can see me if you want to, mm-hmm. Which had a kind of a romantic kind of feel to it. And the other one was Identity Crises,
right?
Which was actually before, what was his name? The English guy. He did a video very much like it. Adamant.
Yeah, okay.
He was Clint Eastwood. He was Alice Cooper in one of the things. Mm-hmm. Well, in this one, I was James Bond. I was Billy the Kid. I was, Sherlock Holmes.
Jack the
And it was kind of that was actually the when we did that, it was pre-Adamant. So, I mean, I think that they got the idea for their video from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it was, a great story. We're going to this big house to film a video. Duh. Plot formula number 34 slasher film.
Yeah. And speaking of a house and everything, I saw your real ghost story, the celebrity ghost story.
Well, and that was funny because that actually relates to that because I was writing those songs for that movie with Joe Perry.
Yeah.
That's why we were at that house. And the funny thing was, Shep Gordon, just the other night, we were talking about that house in Copaig, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, I was there one night when the dining room table flew across the room to the other side of the house.
Wow.
And I said, what? And he goes, yeah. He said, that house, there was something really wrong with that house. And I went, did you saw the celebrity thing on it? And he goes, no, I haven't really seen that yet. And I told him the story, and he goes, well, you don't have to convince me. He said, that house was so creepy, I sold it because it was, the guy wrote the Amityville Horror in that house.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Wow. What's your relationship with the concept of ghosts?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I'm one of the guys that watches Ghost Hunters every single week.
We do too.
I'm addicted to it.
My wife and I do too.
Yeah. So Wednesday night is Ghost Hunter night.
Oh yeah.
And I've actually had Grant and Jason on my radio show. And I told them, I said, hey guys, I watch your show every week. I said, I think it's really fascinating. And they go, it's funny because 80% of the stuff we totally disprove. Mm-hmm. As being leaky pipes or, or drafts and whatever. They said, but the 20% of the stuff we get really freaks us out sometimes too. Mm-hmm. Because we can't explain it. And we go out of our way to try to explain every single thing we can. And when we can't explain it, it really, really gets us.
Yeah.
And the only thing I asked them, I said, did you ever understand that something could go home with you?
Yeah.
I said, what if it got in the car and went home with you? And they kind of went, yeah, I never thought of that.
Have you had other experiences in your life like that, like in the house?
Not really. Not really. Coming from a Christian background, it's an interesting thing because I have kind of a theory about it. I don't really think that there are spirits that just wander around. I mean, biblically, that doesn't happen. You're either in heaven or hell.
Right, yeah, yep.
The only thing that's really allowed to wander around are demons. And a demon can imitate a little girl, it can imitate an old woman, it can imitate anything it wants. So I think in some ways that these guys are, without knowing it, playing with demons. Mm. And so in a lot of ways, I avoid it. I'm fascinated to watch it, but I would never go on a ghost hunt.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think it's, for me, it's against the rules.
In 1986, you did the soundtrack for Friday the 13th, Jason Lives.
Yeah.
And it was unusual, and it's the only film in the series that's this way, and it's unusual in film as a whole, to have a song written basically about the main character. I don't know if they expected that.
They wanted me to write it, and I just said, well, who's the man behind the mask? I mean, that's the scary. It's not the mask that's scary; it's the man behind the mask.
Right.
And I thought, write it as a pop song. You're with your baby, and you're alone, and you're apart, and all of a sudden there he is. He's the man behind the mask. Mm-hmm. I kind of tried to do a 3-minute little movie in that in the lyrics of that.
Yeah.
To kind of depict it, but I always thought, that would be the scary part: is who is the man behind the mask.
How did that change so drastically from the poppy demo version heard on the Life and Crimes box set to what ended up in the film and released commercially? Well,
there were two versions of it. There was like a version that actually was a huge hit in Finland and in Sweden, in places where the movie wasn't allowed. But the guy that wrote the music to it, Tom Kelly, wrote Like a Virgin.
Oh.
He wrote Madonna's hits.
Sure.
And I said, what if we had that? But the lyrics were this, and we made it a little more gritty. And so, it had that pop feel to it. But it also, when you started realizing what they were talking about, it had the edge enough for it to be a hit. It was actually a hit. So,
Wow. And it came with a great video where you're the man behind the mask.
Right.
Video, and you're integrated into the film and everything. That's one of my favorite videos of yours.
Yeah, well, that was. And again, I was, a big fan of at that time of all those movies. Mm-hmm. Hoping that they would never end. Yeah. And still now Rob Zombie's got them.
Yeah.
And doing them, and to me, you either had to be a Jason fan, a Michael Myers fan, or a Freddy fan, and I was always more a Michael Myers fan.
Yeah.
Only because of the fact that there was no emotion in what he did.
Yeah.
It was he was just a killing machine. And Jason was like that too, I guess. But, Freddy Krueger was a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
He was the Henny Young enough to, every time he would do something, he would say something funny, and pretty soon you're going, I love that. He's good at what he does here.
Yeah.
But Michael Myers just had this, this coldness about him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And with Freddy's an unusual character in that, and we'll touch on Freddy in a minute here. Actually, but he's a child molester. Yeah,
they're actually yelling at me to get off the phone, but I'm going to give you some more time here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, we'll speed ahead then.
Okay.
When did you meet John Carpenter? He told me a story about you going to a wrestling event.
Yeah, I think he was at WrestleMania 3. Mm-hmm. He's a big wrestling fan. Mm-hmm. I mean, more than he should be. Just knowing that it's all fake.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going, really? Sort of, you're really buying into this, huh? But he loves it.
Wow.
I don't know if he loves it as comedy or what, but I mean, we all kind of like smirk and go, yeah, it's wrestling.
Yeah.
But no, he was way into it, and saw me at that when I did that with the Honky Tonk Man and
Jake the Snake
and all that. Yeah, which was kind of my kind of theater. I understood that. But when he saw that, and then my manager started making movies with him. They did Shocker, and they did, what was it? They Live Under the Stairs.
Oh, People Under the
People
Stairs.
Under the Stairs,
Yeah.
and they did They Live. He did 3 movies with my manager as producing it. And then when he was going to do Prince of Darkness, I said, I want to come down and watch the filming of it. And I went down, and he says, hey, it'd be great if you were one of these street zombie kind of characters. I went, okay. And I put the, hat on, and pretty soon he said, no, well, he said, that thing you do in the show where you put the mic stand through the guy's chest, that trick? And I go, yeah. He says, could you do that with a bicycle? And I went, well, sure. It's just a matter of what comes out the other side.
Yeah.
It's a simple trick. And he said, well, let's do that. So pretty soon now, I'm 5 days of shooting. I went down there to watch them do a couple of special effects, to being in the movie now on set, 7 in the morning, and he says, the idea on this movie is for you to be really scary without saying a word. No lines. It's just almost pantomime.
Right.
And I went, well, that would be fun.
Yeah.
For this guy to never say a word and yet be the leader of these scary people outside, So, yeah, it was a great experience. So John gave me a great experience in that, and the fact that he says, no lines. I just want you to be scary in the way you look. I want you to be threatening.
And then in 1991, you played Freddy's dad in Freddy's Dead for Rachel Talalay.
Which was great, yeah. I actually got to say, Freddy, come here, boy, take your medicine. And now the hardest thing about that was, when we got ready to do it, he's going to put a straight razor through my eyeball. And about 4 times, he's getting ready to do it, and both of us started laughing. And I said, okay, that's not going to work. Laughing's not going to work at all. And we had to, once you got into the giggles,
yeah,
you have to walk away from it. Because now it's a trigger.
Yeah.
That he said, he gets ready to put it through my eye, and you go, and you start laughing. So, okay, finally we got it to the point, where he could put the razor blade through my eye. And, but I always tell people, they said the hardest thing about making horror movies is that the scarier it gets, the funnier it gets. And for the actors, you really have to really concentrate on what's going, that that this is really happening, and you have to be terrified at this.
Yeah. Was it a big deal for you to be Freddy's dad?
Oh, it was great. I loved the idea. I said, first of all, it's great that I don't have to be Alice.
Oh, yeah,
It's fun to play Alice, but I was Alice in Wayne's World, and I was Alice in this, and Alice in that. It's great to be a character, not Alice. I said, cast me as the priest next time, or cast me as, I know you want me to play the bad guy, which is great, but give me a bad guy part that's not Alice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you did a short called Freak Show in 1999 with were you the Pirate Jack Pumpkin?
Oh yeah, right. That was kind of fun. Another part I got was Attic Expeditions. That I really
2001.
liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when I got to play the escape artist. I forget my name, Phil Rothman or something
Samuel
like that.
Leventhal.
Yeah, right. And I was the guy that kept escaping from the mental institution.
Yeah. Jeffrey Combs was in it. Ted Raimi, and yeah.
And when I saw who was in it, I said, oh, these are all my buddies. I know all these guys.
See, and then Suck in 2009, the vampire, winged bartender, Henry Rollins,
yes.
Iggy was in that with you.
Well, the great thing about that was I actually had a lot of good lines in that.
Oh.
And I had to actually play that part, that one scene when we're in the crossroads, and we're walking around kind of stalking each other, and he's yelling at me. And
oh, yeah.
It was 5 degrees.
You can tell it looks freezing.
I'm telling you, it was so cold. It's in Toronto in December, and I had this little thin coat on, and he had a T-shirt on, I think. And we're walking around doing these lines, and it was a lot of lines. It was about 5 pages of dialect. And it was so hard not to have your teeth chatter. My mouth was, but I was concentrating so hard on my lines that I forgot how cold it was. But after every take, you'd have to have this big parka put on you. Because, it was freezing cold. But it was fun. I mean, it was the bar scenes were great because you were inside.
Yeah. You mentioned not playing Alice on screen. Have you ever considered or been approached about an Alice Cooper movie? Like Kiss made Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park as a point of reference here, where they were the characters.
I think it's going to be closer to an Alice Cooper Broadway play. I think that would be and later on somebody might make the story about me because there was the alcoholism, there was the almost dying when I was 12, and then there was all the the rise of Alice, the fall of Alice, the rise of Alice again. So there's a good story there.
Yeah.
The love story, Cheryl and I, 35 years.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of great stuff in the story, and it has a happy ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there is a good movie there. But I think that it would be a better Broadway show, just called Alice. And you could, you have all the music already written. Again, 20 years from now, anybody could play Alice.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be me.
Yeah, it's like that Beatles and Elvis on the Cirque du Soleil. They have an Elvis show.
Exactly. Well, could you imagine what Cirque du Soleil, how much fun they could have with Alice Cooper?
Oh, my God.
It would be a nightmare that would go on forever, and it could be really, truly scary.
This needs to happen.
Yes. Let's call those guys. Dragon.
Where would Vincent be without Alice today?
You know what? I probably would have been like a movie writer, or I probably would have been a journalist or something like that. I don't think I would have walked out there on the stage without the character. It was being in the band in front of a bar for 4 hours a night, every night for 2 years, that really got me into the idea of, well, I can perform, but if I hadn't had the band, I never would have probably gotten the courage up to perform. But I can almost guarantee I would have been in the arts somewhere.
We've talked about your roles you played, about Alice, and your appearances on film. In life as a whole, what role have you played that you're the most proud of?
Oh, I'm the best dad in the world. I am. And my wife is sitting right here, and she just said, and you're the best husband, too.
Aww.
So, yeah, that's me.
That's great. And
my assistant just said, and the best boss.
And the best interview, so there you go. Love for Alice.
No, I would take pride in being a good dad and a good husband. That sounds corny, but it really is my full-time job. Everything else is, I play Alice, I play golf, I play this. But, what my real life is coming home every day and being consistent, Yeah.
And Red Wings or Coyotes?
You know what? Yeah, on that one, I've got to go Red Wings.
All right.
But I'm a Lions-Tigers fan all the way.
Okay.
I'm Phoenix Suns, too. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just curious. I had to ask. Yeah. You're relocated, and I know that the Coyotes are kind of struggling there in town. And
I go to the games. I really do.
Yeah.
I really go to the games. The hard game for me is when they play the Red Wings.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in Detroit, and I grew up watching Gordie Howe play,
Yeah.
So, that's kind of like deep in my psyche, you know.
Oh, that's great that you're into hockey. That's wonderful. And my parents go out to, I had to tell you this, my parents go out to Phoenix every year, and they have some friends who live probably about a couple miles from you. And you have to be the biggest celebrity in a town where Wayne Gretzky lives. Alice Cooper is the biggest celebrity in town, I have to say.
Well, it's, I'm available to a lot of people. I do a lot of, I got Solid Rock Foundation there, so I try to do a lot of charity work for them. We try to get kids out of gangs and into music.
Great.
We say, look, put your gun down, I'll give you a guitar.
Yeah.
And we'll teach you how to play it. Because, and Cheryl does that with dance. She had the first night that she opened up, she closed down her Destiny Dance studio, went to the West Side to this place called Neighborhood Ministries, and opened a thing called West Side Story. And it was like, come in, we'll teach you dance for free. Gang kids, right? 400 kids showed up the first night.
Wow.
That just shows you that they're looking for something other than that life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, Alice, this has truly been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate you staying over time with me here.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm impressed that you know that much about me.
I've been a fan all my life, and so not something I normally start gushing over with people. But it is a real honor to talk to you. And
well, I'm saving the world from a Monster Dog Part 2. Okay.
Hey, you never know.
If I get Zombie to direct it, yeah, I would do it.
Rachel Talalay and I go way back. Taint Girl was one of the first discs that I produced on my own for Shout Factory, and at that time we really hit it off. We started at that point working on an autobiography of hers, which she actually is nearing completion on now. And we've, when I'm in LA and she happens to be there, we're sure to get together. We hop on the phone every once in a while and catch up on whatever's going on. Of course, she worked real closely with John Waters. And so after I was in Baltimore hanging out with John, what was that, earlier this year, maybe end of last year, Rachel and I had a great conversation just about all things John Waters at that time. But here I got her on the phone specifically just to talk about Alice and working with him on Freddy's Dead. I hope you enjoy this little chat with Rachel, and certainly more to come on this Alice Cooper mega episode.
Do you remember with that, I mean, the scene with Alice in the film is obviously relatively brief, but important when considering the history of the character of Freddy. How did you do you remember how you approached the scene with Alice and what you were looking for from him? He was pretty grimy in that role. It was great.
I mean, he was totally open to whatever we wanted, in terms of there were no issues of, I have to be this way, I have to be that way. So we sat down and just talked about what we thought would work in terms of the sort of abusive nature without being too cliched.
Right.
But still sort of keeping his image. And he seemed very comfortable with the sort of dark, low-key approach, nothing, massively over the top.
Right.
So that was sort of something we arrived at together.
Gotcha. Well, he's obviously pretty skilled with a whip, too, so that probably came in handy.
Of course, a challenge, because it doesn't matter what you make something like that out of. You're going to hurt, it doesn't matter if you make it out of the lightest plastic, you still can't hit somebody that hard.
Right.
Pad them up. So that took some thought.
When he came to the set, do you remember your impression of him? I mean, I obviously you'd worked with Iggy before, and
right.
A number of big names that have a persona. Iggy is kind of that wild, isn't he? Kind of the wild, woolly guy all the time, intense.
On a John Waters film, because everyone is so nuts. Because everyone is such, that's not fair. Because there's so many personalities.
Yeah.
And there's so, especially on Crybaby, there were such, massive personalities. He, wasn't any more dramatic in a way. He found his sort of, he liked, it was a comfortable situation where nobody felt the need to be any more than they were.
Yeah.
Because you had so many, out there personalities, especially on that film. I mean, dealing with Joey Heatherton and Susan Terrell and Joe D'Alessandro and Patty Hearst. I mean, so, he was just they all had, and then Johnny Depp. They all had their, and we had a very funny conversation on that show where, and then I'll go back to Alice, but where we were discussing where everyone had been arrested. And everyone had been arrested in the group except David Nelson, who said, but Ricky was. And Ricky Lake had been arrested for some animal rights thing. And I was the only other person who had never been arrested. And I'm trying to keep it that way. Back to Alice Cooper. So my biggest memory of the day was that the crew was more excited than I've ever seen them with anybody. It was just, and as I said, I've worked with a lot of names. And it was just, they were just so unbelievably thrilled and amazed to have Alice Cooper on set. So there was much more buzz among the crew than I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And that was very, very cool. I mean, he was completely, I don't know if he was nervous, but he was totally professional, and quite low key on set. So, and everyone was so respectful, and so that worked. So there weren't any. I just don't have any stories. The reason I asked for the first AD was that he is a diehard, massive Alice Cooper fan, and he he's like the most low-key guy ever, which is why I love him as the first AD.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen him, so excited by having somebody on set. And I think that he took a photograph, so I just emailed him to ask him if he had one. So he went and very embarrassedly went up and said, "Can we have a photograph?" And I thought, I've never seen Mike like this ever. It's funny what you remember, but that's the thing that stuck with me more than anything about the day, because Alice was very easy to work with. And it just worked. I mean, everything was completely straightforward. And besides, sort of finding that line between how hard can you whip a kid,
yeah,
not hurt them.
Yeah,
that's really all my memory was about. Everyone else being, much more quiet and respectful than you ever see them, because they were like, we're in the presence of greatness that we don't normally. And it's with all businesses. It's like Hollywood is amazed by sports stars, and sports stars are amazed by Hollywood. And,
yeah.
Everybody wants to be what they aren't.
Right.
So it was a much bigger deal.
When Alice he's a pretty small guy in stature, but when he walks into a room, what does he bring with him into the room? And is there any sort of, you said he was quiet. Is he a real humble guy on set?
He was on our set.
Yeah.
And actually, we had a cameo from Johnny Depp on Freddy's Dead as well.
Yeah.
And that didn't raise the expectations of the crew like having Alice there was.
Oh, that's great.
Had he done other, no, I can't even remember. Had he done other movie work before Freddy?
Yeah, he had. And actually, what's interesting is that despite he's been a fan of horror all of his life, and he's so excited about, the whole genre as an approach. In his music, he involves it in there. But
yeah.
Over time, he hasn't made that many appearances in film, which is kind of shocking, because a lot of guys in rock, they
right.
pop up here and there throughout, like, Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons continue to pop up. He was the main star in a film in '84 called Monster Dog that was shot over in Italy. He was in, he's since, in the last few years, he's played a few parts, but he's never been a main,
right.
He's never been cast in much, yeah.
It wasn't based, it was based on his personality that he was our choice, and we were definitely going, we wanted somebody who wasn't doing the too much work, and I wasn't afraid of, for a role like this, of the acting chops, because I knew we could get there with a role like this.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. No, he was very humble. He was very concentrated, humble. There wasn't an entourage. There wasn't a big, to do. There was, and it was all very straightforward. Was
Robert on set with him at all when he was there? Did Robert want to meet him or anything?
I don't remember.
I just because I know he's not in the scene or anything, but I was curious if he had been on set. And I emailed Robert and asked him if he's going to look and see if he happens to have any pictures or anything of the two of them that were together that day. But I was just curious if he remembered.
I don't remember. It's likely that Robert was in makeup because Robert was always in makeup.
Yeah.
It's likely, there were very. Robert worked every day, and there were very few. And Robert had 3 hours of makeup every day, so it's quite likely that they ended up in a makeup chair together.
Freddy's family was never addressed until that film, and you've obviously been a part of pretty much the whole series up until. And when it came time to approach that, were you trying to suggest that it was more of Freddy's upbringing that was the result of that, which we could translate into Alice Cooper's the reason Freddy Krueger became Freddy Krueger, or was it just more?
Yeah.
Definitely that line when he says, I mean, and I was working with Mike DeLuca on the screenplay, and we were talking about a lot about the essence of child abuse and how the turning point. So this was really very well thought out in terms of the turning point of when you stop caring, you can do anything. The history of serial killers, and so that this was definitely a critical moment from that point of view in the Freddie upbringing, was to say that the child abuse is what made him instead of having the effect that the abuser hopes, they turned him into the monster that he became.
Right. And that's something that was actually kind of shockingly lost throughout the series as Freddy became sort of the poster boy. He's having centerfolds and Fango, and he's lunchboxes and toys and all this. Well, you lose track of the idea. And
the fascinating thing for me about the series was having sat through many test screenings and many audience screenings, through the first 6.
Right.
Was that the audience rooted both, and this I tried to get people to understand that what's so interesting about this is the audience rooted both for Freddie and for the kids, and the balance we had to find was the one where they really cared about the kids, because Freddie was obviously the hero,
right?
The anti-hero hero. But the balance we had to find was to allow them to still root for the kids, but still enjoy everything that Freddie did, but still have them upset when the kids are killed.
Right.
So, and that actually, ironically, really worked, because the obvious place to go, and I think what most people who haven't analyzed it think, is that people just sort of root for Freddie as, Freddie, but they didn't. What engaged them was the fact that these kids actually were able to battle for themselves, and they were in some ways, Freddie was embodying all their fears and abuse and everything else.
Right.
So it was a really interesting sociological study to be able to get both of them, as opposed to, I think, in the Friday the 13th, you frequently just wanted Jason to kill,
That brings up an interesting question that isn't necessarily Alice related. Throughout the evolution of the Nightmare series, did you feel a race or any kind of a keeping up with the Joneses, while a lot of, with Friday the 13th, the Chainsaw Massacre films, things were getting, more fantastic with each sequel. Was there a race that you guys were dealing with between you and Friday the 13th, or any kind of competition there?
No, I think we felt superior. I mean, I think we just knew that we had a much more interesting, we had a franchise that it was so much easier and more interesting and more creative to be working in the dream world.
Yeah.
So that we knew that we had a franchise where we could do so much more. And we weren't stuck with, it's Slumber Party Massacre. it's, basically the Friday the 13th question was, what venue are you putting it in?
Yep.
And that was it. And we felt that we never felt any, at least I never did in all the development, any competition or anything. But I think on Freddy's Dead, some of the things that I tried to do because we had made 4 films in 4 years, and there was a feeling of the burnout factor, which is why we went with the 3D, and we tried to do some things that were very different, some of which are disparaged now, with the fact that there's more comedy, the fact that I did do the stunt casting, that it was more this sort of, feeling that but as I said in the documentary, you have to understand the time period and the fact that we'd made four similar films in a 4-year period.
Yeah.
So the attempts of trying to attempt things that are different, and this idea that if this was going to be the last one, that we did have to tell this background story about Freddie. We did have to tell his, those vignettes of his upbringing were very, very important to the story.
Right.
To allowing him to be able to be killed.
Right. Oh, I think that's what makes this series so unique. You hit it right on the head that, fans, there's a lot more to hold on to here. And you truly never know what you're going to get when you walk into a Nightmare film. And that always held true for the series, whereas in Friday the 13th, it wasn't as much. And it's interesting that they're always they tend to bookend conversations, the two franchises. But, with Friday, it very much is what kind of weapon and how.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with anything outside of that, but you guys had carte blanche to go wherever you wanted with the series, and I thought that's what made it different.
I wanted to back up to one thing. You sparked one memory from the Alice Cooper day. It's amazing how these questions, just how far back I have to delve. There was a huge conversation about his hair, because we didn't want him to look like it. We wanted to know it was Alice Cooper, but we didn't want him to look like Alice Cooper. And of course, he has, this amazing Alice Cooper hair.
Yeah.
So what to do with his hair and how to make him more redneck, and he was cool about it. But that, I think, was the thing I was most nervous about, was, is he going to insist on, on that we can't do this or we can't do that, because he has to keep his persona, as all good actors do. He loved becoming somebody else. And I think potentially the Loki-ness on set had to do with him just being part of, getting into the character and getting into the intensity of the character, which was completely different from his stage persona. I met him at the movies about a month after I'd worked with him, and just randomly, and I just bumped into him, and he was so effusive about what a good time he had, and what a great, how glad he was that he'd been able to work on it. So that was cool.
Neat. So you guys ended up with the hair. Obviously, you don't see his hair.
Right. You put it up. Well, we had to tuck it all up and put it under a cap and everything to get, so that was the solution.
Obviously, I love the film. It was a surprisingly, among when I started talking to people about doing, speaking with you today, a lot of people love that film.
It's nice to hear that, because there are people who really disparage me for, there's that slightly, that edge that it wasn't violent enough, that it was the one that was the, the girliest. And, I certainly didn't want that to be how it was viewed, but it was really, I really like people to understand that was part of the time, and the fact that we were trying to make it so different. What's elemental about the original film is just how scary it is.
Yeah.
We doubled the box office on Nightmare 3 when we made it less scary and more of a date movie. And that's the place we were in by the time we were making Freddy's Dead. That was the mandate. The mandate wasn't to go back to Nightmare 1. The mandate was to keep broadening the audience. So that's what I was told to aim for. And that, therefore, adding the extra casting, the stunt casting and things like that was embraced and engaged. So.
Rob Stefaniuk is an amazing director. He put out this movie called Suck in 2009 that is, it has so many different creative elements in it. The simple story is that it's about a rock and roll band where one of them happens to become a vampire, and then their adventures on the road. But this thing, in addition to featuring Alice Cooper as the devil, it also has a real all-star cast of other rock and roll personalities like Iggy Pop, Henry Rollins, Moby is in it, Alex Lifeson from Rush, and then you have Malcolm McDowell. Comedian Dave Foley makes an appearance in this. It's kind of like a Canadian who's who in a lot of ways, but also a musical who's who. The standout for me, though, of course, Alice Cooper as the devil standing at the crossroads in this very pivotal moment in the story. And Rob Stefaniuk, his filmmaking covers all kinds of different elements. Not only is there all the live action stuff, this also has music video elements built into it. And then beyond that is some Rankin Bass style stop motion animation, like when the band is traveling through the mountains. The way he portrays that is with stop motion claymation, which is just brilliant. If you haven't seen Suck from 2009, I highly recommend tracking it down. It's out there on video. And here is my chat with Rob Stefaniuk about his time working on Suck and with Alice Cooper. Touching on the Alice today with you here, okay. When did he pop into your mind as an option for the film? Had you been a longtime fan?
Yeah, of course. And, it's sort of, Alice is like a no-brainer, but it wasn't immediate. Alice is a no-brainer because of the rock and roll horror. You're making a rock and roll horror, so
right.
He's the guy that started that. But, at that point, we didn't really think that we'd be getting people at that sort of caliber, We just, you just didn't assume that was going to happen. And it was just more like it was more just like on a like what would you call it? Like just like why the fuck not? We'll try this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of like it was sort of like that because at first you try to get like famous people to play the leads, and it's like it's not going to work, to get people in there for that many days and whatever. It sort of came around the concept of, well, what about if we had like more famous people in the secondary roles, And then it was like, well, I'd want them to be musicians, because originally I wanted the band to be all real musicians, but then it was like, well, that would be really cool. So I was like, first sort of came up, but you had to have like a whole list of people because like you can't make an offer until you have the money.
Yeah.
And once you get the money, you're on a real time crunch. So you can offer it to Alice Cooper, but if Alice Cooper says no, you have to have someone famous, so the money goes away. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's kind of like, so it was really fucking nerve-wracking because you want Alice Cooper and Iggy Pop and Henry Rollins, but maybe end up with David Hasselhoff. So yeah, I mean that was sort of that was sort of the thing. It's like Alice was like a logical first choice, but we started offering parts. We started offering to guys before like we even had enough parts.
Yeah.
Like assuming Alice wasn't going to do it or whatever, But once Iggy came on board, then it became a lot more real because he was sort of like first of the rock stars to sort of come on board, and then Alex sort of came on. But once we came to Alice, he already knew everyone in our movie. So
yeah.
he's friends with Malcolm and he's friends with Iggy and for 40 years, and he knows Henry, so he knew everyone. So he was like, yeah, sure. No problem. We're like, what? It's like, fuck. And so I actually ended up writing that part for Alice. Because, it's like we want to get rock stars, and there's certain parts that it could be, but I didn't want him to just be, I didn't want him to just be walking into the movie and saying, hi. I mean, we got Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be a more major part. So I sort of wrote the part for him and then sent him that offer, and then to my amazement, he said yes.
Had you seen any of his previous work, like Monster Dog and Freddy's Dead and Prince of Darkness?
No, I hadn't really. I mean, I don't watch a lot of horror films. I was coming at this more from a music angle. I like horror. My brother is in special effects, so I grew up around horror.
Yeah.
He had every Fangoria magazine for like 10 years or longer, 20 years. So so I was always around sort of horror. But I was never a big horror fan. I was a big music person, So I had his records.
So tell me about when Alice arrives on set.
Well, the funniest thing actually about that was before he arrived on set. I was like, I was on set and I was stressed out, and we were in a hotel in just outside of Toronto, shooting something I forget. And the phone rang, and someone handed me my phone, which should have been off. And I was kind of flustered, because I'm trying to make this movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like, don't we look busy? And I thought, well, fuck it, his phone's already answered. So I was like, hello, and it's like, hi, it's Alice. And I was like, whoa. I was like, okay, everyone stop. And I just sort of walked off set and then talked to him. It was really kind of a crazy moment,
Yeah.
And then he was like totally cool and totally nice, and he was like, yeah, don't worry, I'll bring all this stuff, and this is great, and it was like totally cool, and Alice was like, then when he actually came on set, when you're doing a little movie like that, like people come out of the woodwork when you have like Alice Cooper on your set.
Sure.
And everyone's like, oh, can I come to set that day? It's like, no. And I didn't want anyone bugging him. He was totally cool, like, on set, like, put me totally at ease, was totally pro, great actor, like, totally prepared and everything. It wasn't like, because you don't really know. Like, I know he'd been in other films before and stuff, and I had seen something. And same with Iggy, and, but you don't really know what the director had to go through to get whatever.
Right.
Assume that they're charismatic. They're going to work on film, but you don't know what their technique is, and you don't know if you're going to be able to direct them. And if any of them just say, "Hey, fuck you, kid," and walk off, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but it was like nothing could be further from the truth. They were Alice so totally put me at ease, totally calm, and was totally great with all the people that were around that did want to see him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was like very accessible, very cool, telling funny stories, and it was great.
When he came on set, did he now? And I've talked to several other people who have worked with him, and I'm just curious what your response was when you saw him. Is he what you expected of him, and did he carry sort of an aura about him when he came on set?
Well, he a celebrity like always does. I mean, I met lots of celebrities, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of different with rock stars, though. You know, that being said, I mean, I was in LA for a while. I've met lots of famous people, but with rock stars, it's kind of different because, like, you remember them, especially someone like Alice Cooper. Like, that's from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's before I sort of understood anything. So those people were sort of bigger than life. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having like a nightmare about Alice Cooper as a child.
Oh, really? Well, tell me about it.
I remember I was at an Alice Cooper. This is like I'm a little kid. I was at an Alice Cooper concert, and he had Snake on, and in his white tuxedo. I remember thinking I was too little to be at this scary concert.
Yeah.
And I was like lost, and there was like a snake. I don't know. I remember it, but I still remember it to this day.
Did you tell him about that?
No. The point of the story is that those are people that you knew before you sort of formed your opinion about how the world worked, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it was like really, it's cool to meet someone like that. And yeah, they all have sort of like an aura, you know, it's a star, a charisma, and especially for me, what's more important is when you point the camera at them, you know? When you point the camera at them, they have this instant credibility that other people don't have. You know, it's just in their face. You can't fake that face. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't fake that look in the eyes. That's just money in the bank.
What did he do with the character? Did you ask anything of him, and what did he pull out that maybe surprised you about how he approached it?
What he surprised me with his subtlety, his performance. You know what I mean? That he was just bang dead on, and that he sort of fed off my energy. We just connected, and I think the first scene we did together was at the Bovine at the bar when he's saying, "Hey, you know, have another round." That scene was, I think, our first scene together, and yeah, that's what surprised me most. You know, it was just the subtlety and the total realism, and just how good he was.
Yeah,
but I don't think I gave him any direction. You know, I mean, other than stand here, call me over here, and when we start doing this scene in the crossroads, start walking around because I want it to be a circular shot, stuff like that.
Yeah.
There was no line reading. There was no do it like this. He got it totally, and he's a funny guy. So
yeah,
you know, it was kind of effortless. And then the fact that it was effortless, and it just made it fun. You know, then it's like then you get to sit back and go, fuck, I'm in the scene with Alice Cooper, being like a little boy and like dancing to School's Out, you know, it's just weird, you know.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the documentary on the DVD, the behind the scenes, and how honest and upfront you were, and sort of you were just very very truthful with the camera in terms of the experience that you were having. Yeah, well, I think anyone with pretensions, you know, I think you get so much more out of people if you're just genuine and you're genuinely working hard. Yeah.
You don't have to yell at anyone or tell anyone or boss anyone around. People feed off the fact that if you're trying to do something good, even if it doesn't work, but if you're trying, you know, and that's your motivation, you know, to make something good. Everyone just works a little harder for you.
Yeah.
So, and I had like the greatest guys helping me, you know.
So you mentioned the crossroads scene. Alice told me about that, saying that he could not believe how freezing cold it was that day, and that he was having a challenge not chattering his teeth. He was that cold.
That was a nightmare. Yeah, we both sort of froze our asses off. And I tried to, like, every time you say cut, like, say, you know, get the blankets on him and stuff, and get the blankets, you know, trying to, you know, didn't want to freeze him to death. But it was we couldn't, you know, it was a 360 shot.
Yeah.
The crew was up the road and around the corner, so yeah, it was fucking cold. Did he tell you about the school bus?
No.
Well, it's just kind of funny. Like, there's Alice Cooper in like a snake red leather jacket.
Yeah.
The school bus goes by, the kids sort of, you know, the kids wave and Alice Cooper waves back. It's kind of like a surreal moment. I saw the devil.
You said that he brought some stuff with him. Did he bring any of his costuming or anything along with him?
He did. He brought some stuff. I mean, originally he said, "Oh, I'll bring everything because you guys don't have money and I have all that stuff."
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, "Well, we have to. This one jacket, we have to provide for you because we have to destroy it because we have to cut a big hole in the back of it to put these wings, the wing rig on, And that was a little nerve-wracking too. Like there's Alice there, and he's wearing this big wing rig, and there's a ditch right behind him. I was just thinking, oh my God! You just see, as soon as they open those wings, I could just see him falling back into that ditch, and that'll be the end of my fucking career.
He actually did use or you guys were able to incorporate some of his stuff?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'd have to check with wardrobe, but I know he brought stuff.
Yeah.
I know he brought stuff, probably the stuff he was wearing at the Bovine and stuff.
And then, how did Calico get involved?
Calico got involved when my producer Gabriella suggested Calico because she was just like looking up on the website about. I guess she was just researching. I mean, again, you have to ask her specifically, but
Sure.
It was her idea because she said, he has this daughter Calico, and she does this stuff, and she's an actor too. And I was like, great, have her be the bartender. Calico was fantastic to work with. She was a real positive. Yeah, I worked with her before her father, so.
Oh, okay.
She was like, but she was great.
Were they on set together at all?
Yeah, they were on the next day. We had to shoot this one scene with Dave Foley. We had to pretend we were in the bar with his schedule to shoot his scene, and then do the over the shoulder with Calico the next time.
Gotcha.
And then it actually ended up not even being a problem because the day that Dave wasn't available, they pushed his shoot so he could actually have been there. But so we shot the scene with Dave Foley meeting Calico, and then we shot with Alice. But we'd already gotten the bulk of that scene on the separate set.
Yeah.
But then we did end up having him there that day too. But yeah, and she was great. She was again telling funny stories. Was a total positive, really positive, funny people are just a great blessing on a film set,
Sure.
And she was certainly that.
And here we have ring legend Jake the Snake Roberts. I have always been such a huge fan of his. I got to see him wrestle a few times as a kid because WWF would always come to Cedar Rapids, where I grew up. My dad at that time was working for the Cedar Rapids Gazette newspaper, and so we basically had free tickets to whatever we wanted to see at what was then called the Five Seasons Center in downtown. It's our arena. Now it's kind of a modestly sized arena compared to so many of them that are out there. But back in the day, it was certainly a hot spot. And I don't think we missed a single wrestling show from the time my brother and I started watching it through to maybe when I was just coming out of maybe junior high, something like that. This really was the heyday. I got to see a lot of the greats, but one of my all-time favorites was and forever will be Jake the Snake Roberts. He's one of the best promos in the business, one of the greatest minds in the business of wrestling, and he's a really fascinating guy. This interview was done at kind of a unique moment for him. Jake wasn't really wrestling a lot at this time, but since then, he has come back and been involved with, I think, AEW wrestling for some time in a backstage role and a few other things, including a great documentary by Diamond Dallas Page about DDP getting Jake sober. I mean, it's a very stark movie that has some startling revelations in it from Jake, but also it's an inspiring story of a guy who's putting himself back together. So in this interview, you hear a little bit about Jake's being very impressed with Alice's sobriety. And I think at one point Jake says, this isn't something just anyone can do. And he was very impressed with the fact that Alice was able to clean himself up. And again, I'll just make quick reference to my earlier note that the audio for this one is rough because I was recording it by literally on speakerphone, holding my phone up to a recorder. And that's why it's so bad. But I've done my best to kind of dress it up for you to not make it too painful. Anyway, I hope you enjoy Jake the Snake Roberts on Alice Cooper.
So when did you learn that Alice would be involved, and how was the angle explained to you?
It was just a short time before WrestleMania, man. It really blew me away. I mean, cause, high school, school's out for summer was the hot song,
Yeah.
I was just completely blown away, especially whenever we had to do the photo shoot, and we went downtown New York City to the Mayflower Hotel. He was in town doing a concert. And just to be brought into that room with him, you know, and I was like, oh my God, you know, here we're all of a sudden it's like both of us are running at each other. You know, both of us are evidently fans of each other's stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I should have taken advantage of learning a lot more from him. Obviously, he'd been able to cast his demons aside and progress through a career, retake his career, come back out on top, you know, and it's not easy to do.
When did you learn that Alice was going to be involved? Did you get a phone call, or how did that work?
You know, just from Vince.
Okay.
You know, he came to me and I said, hey, we're going to do this thing, Cooper. And I went, Jesus Christ, that was Cooper, holy shit.
And what was your impression of him?
Totally what I didn't expect. You know, I mean, a very meek, small, very small man, and just doing his job, you know, and very calm and very collected.
Did you talk to him about ring etiquette?
No. God, no. No. No, we went to Wrestlemania and did a couple interviews, and that was it. And we went out and did the thing, you know. Basically, you know, how can I tell him what to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm gonna be Jake, and hopefully it'll work out. When we had the finished thing all put together, you know, which is pretty funny because the damn snake was way too heavy for Alice to pick up. The funniest thing that happened during the whole damn thing is when Honky Tonk had me down at one point, and he was talking shit to Alice, and then all of a sudden Alice took the jacket off, and me and Honky Tonk about bit our lips in half, man. I'm laughing because here's these skinny little arms sticking out. It's like, Jesus Christ, put the jacket back. And then, of course, getting the snake out and going after Jimmy Hart with it. Because Jimmy Hart was about to kill me, man. He was kicking my shins and everything else.
Yeah.
I didn't have damn full Nelson, and Alice couldn't get the damn snake over there in time. It was like, God damn, give me that son of a bitch. This little bastard's killing me.
Obviously, Alice is known for loving reptiles. Do you remember, did you introduce him to Damien before the match?
Oh, yeah. I think you just do it and go, man. I mean, there's no introduction to these damn snakes, okay? There's no ears, and they don't hear you, and they're going to do what they want to fucking do anyway. And he had some bad experiences with them, and so have I, you know. I mean, there's nothing quite like being chewed on, you know, by a damn reptile. It's quite exciting. He had some bad instances, too, so.
He shared some with you?
Oh, yeah. He said he went to South America to do a tour, and they guaranteed they'd have a snake for him. Well, yeah, they did. They went out of the damn jungle and beat one out of a fucking tree, you know. And brought it up in a fucking bag. As soon as it come out, it's going goofy on everybody, you know.
The snake with you always seemed to have a pretty good disposition in the ring.
Yeah, well, that's the ones they showed you on television. Okay. They didn't show you the ones that attacked me or bit Andre or bit other people. Usually it was me who's getting bit, which used to piss me off. Like, you son of a bitch, man. I take care of you, prick. You know, back then we were on the road for a couple months at a time. Mm-hmm. And it's bad enough to have to carry, you know, your clothes and your wrestling gear and a 100-pound fucking snake.
Ugh.
Jesus Christ, man, you know. And not all the hotels and all the airports have sky caps that are ready to pick shit up for you either, you know, not at 5 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, you got to change shit from the rental car into this, into that. Here, get on the bus, go back to the airport. You know, it's a real pain in the ass, man.
Yeah.
Then you get to a hotel room and you let it out in the fucking bathroom. It tears the bathroom all to hell, breaks the toilet, gets out of your damn room, or gets out of the bathroom and goes to the damn room and pulls a TV stand over on top of it. And, yeah, there's lots of great times.
Oh, my God.
Counting the dumbass maids that just can't read, do not disturb.
Your interview before the match, as always, is just fantastic. Do you prefer to do your interviews off the cuff, or do you go through a rehearsal?
I always have. I go out there with a thought in mind, just a few words, and then that's where I go with it. It's been a gift that I was given to for whatever reason. I don't know why, but you know, sometimes I wonder if it wasn't because of, you know, what happens to you early in life, man, because early in life I went through a lot of traumatic bullshit. You learn to lie real quick, make you convincing, and I think that had a lot to do with my interviews, you know, why the interviews came across the way they did, because for me as a kid, I was constantly, you know, trying not to be where I was.
So
the match itself that night at WrestleMania 3 was a great lengthy match. You know, you don't see these 15-minute bell to bells anymore. Did it go as planned?
Oh yeah, basically.
Do you remember how the fans reacted to Alice? You say, obviously, he doesn't look like a wrestler.
They went goofy, you know. I mean, you got to remember the demographics are about the same, you know. Wrestling fans, young, the age groups, you know, and Cooper, because he'd been around for so many years. I mean, there's 30, 40 years of fans, man.
Right.
You know, and it was just a pleasure, man. It was simply easy. It was like walking, you know, like out walking a dog, man. You do nothing, man. Just go ahead and be yourself, do your thing. Boom, done. We're out of here.
That wraps up all the interviews that I had done for that issue of Fangoria from years ago, where Alice was on the cover. What an exciting moment. I mean, that was I think the first cover article that I ever had in any of these magazines. I have it framed and on the wall because it just means so much to me. It was such a huge moment. And it was exciting to get to capture so much perspective on Alice and the world around him, not to mention that really revealing interview that you just heard. We're now going to roll into another interview with Alice where I mentioned earlier we're talking a lot about horror stuff, a lot about working with John Carpenter, a lot about his time in Monster Dog, his love for Bela Lugosi, and some other famous names in the genre. So let's get right into that. Here's the second Alice Cooper interview of this episode. How long have you had an interest, or talk about the origin of your interest in the horror genre?
Well, when I was a kid, I was in that first generation that actually grew up on television. You know, that was our babysitter, black and white TV. And every Saturday, every kid on my block, the parents would drop us off at the East Town Theater in Detroit. And it would be The Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Thing That Wouldn't Die, and It Came from Outer Space. It'd be 3 black and white movies, and we'd be there for 6 hours. And then they'd pick us up. But every single weekend, that's all I ever did. We couldn't wait to see what was coming out on the next weekend. So we grew up on black and white movies, and I think that's where I got an appreciation for being scared appropriately and knowing where the humor was. Even then, I thought it was pretty funny that you could see the zipper in the suit, you know. But still, you wanted to be scared by it, you know. And Creature from the Black Lagoon truly scared me. That was the first movie I ran out of the theater, you know, because it was just when he comes into the tent and he, you know, his POV, it was that thing that scared me to death. And but you know, you had to pick who was your favorite, Dracula, the Wolfman, or Frankenstein. You couldn't just like them all. You had to like one, and I was much more of a Dracula guy myself, you know. And then you put them all together, and the only thing you're missing is Abbott and Costello, you know. But we grew up on those horror things. I grew up on The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, you know, all those great One Step Beyond. You know, those were great TV shows. And my parents didn't have any problem with me watching them. I didn't have nightmares. I think I was kind of had a mature look at what those things were when I was very little.
Did you have friends to talk to and share like that experience?
Oh yeah. We had, you know, I don't remember ever having a friend that went, "Oh, that's too scary. I can't go see that." That was kind of like, come on, you know. It was a guy thing to go to see the horror movies and sit there and watch the whole thing, The House of Wax, you know, things like that. It was sort of like your passage into being one of the guys, you know. But I just loved the movies. I loved the idea that it was going to scare me, but it was going to bring me back safely, you know. I think everything changed with The Exorcist. I think when The Exorcist came out, it changed the whole game. Because you can write off The Creature from the Black Lagoon. You can write off Mike Myers. You can write off Jason Voorhees as the boogeyman, the thing that lives under your bed, the thing that's in your closet. The Exorcist didn't speak to your intellect, it spoke to your soul. There was something about the idea of a satanic possession of a little girl that made you feel extremely vulnerable, because you went, that's documented. You know, that has actually happened. Demonic possession is documented. So you were vulnerable. You're not vulnerable to those other guys because they don't exist, but this does exist. And maybe same with Alien. When Alien came out, we're not really quite sure. That could happen. So anything that could happen is something that makes you extremely vulnerable. Anything that deep down where you go, okay, yeah, it's fun to watch, but that guy doesn't exist, you know. I think maybe Hannibal Lecter too. Hannibal Lecter was another guy you could put into the category of The Exorcist, because here's a guy that may be walking among us at any time. And what he does is actually happened at Gein, you know. So those are the things that make you vulnerable, is things that do exist.
Where does Alice fit into that pantheon?
I am much more classic fantasy stuff. Alice is, you know, people look at the new monsters now, it's Alice, Manson, Rob Zombie, you know, Ozzy. And I figured it all out. I'm Dracula, right? Zombie is definitely the Wolfman with all the hair. If you've ever seen Manson, he is Frankenstein. I mean, he wears the big, and he stands like this tall, you know. And Ozzy is, you know, he's the Mummy, you know. So when we go on tour together, it's, you know, it's Dracula versus the Wolfman with me and Zombie out together. And now it's Manson and myself, so it's like Dracula versus Frankenstein, you know. And we are the new monsters, so it's great, you know. But I think I've always said that comedy and horror are so close to each other. They're just, you know, a paper width apart, you know. And I think Zombie and I probably have the best sense of humor about it, you know, because his movies are just so ridiculous, you know. They're great.
You actually made a start in the horror film Monster Dog. Can you talk about that experience?
Monster Dog was the first thing. I became sober. My daughter was born, Calico was born. I decided I've got to get sober. This party is over. Another party's going to start now. So I've got to get sober. I got sober. And I told my manager, now I've got to see if I can work 9 to 5 sober. So he says, I found a movie they want you to play in. It's only going to be released in the Philippines. It's going to be shot in Spain. And you play the lead. You're not the monster. You're the Clint Eastwood guy. And I went, and you have to know your lines, and you have to be up at 6 a.m. You have to, you know, and I went, okay, let's go see if I can work sober. And I did the movie totally sober and everything, you know, got up every morning, knew all my lines, everything like that. And I was kind of glad in the middle of the movie that it was only going to be released in the Philippines. But it was so bloody that the film crew had to wear like raincoats, because it was just blood everywhere. It was just going, you know, the dogs were ripping people to pieces and everything like that. And that's my kind of movie. I love C movies. I would rather see a C movie than an A movie, anytime. Yeah, if I pick up a horror movie, a DVD, and it's anybody I've ever heard of, I don't buy it. I only buy movies where it's people like, I've never heard of these people. Good, let's get it. Let's see what it is. And you get some of the greatest, really crappy movies, but they're actually pretty good, some of them, you know.
Talk about the experience and the communication issues that you had during the making of Monster Dog with the language barrier. Wasn't that something you told me about?
This is one of the strangest things of all time. Everybody in the cast was British or American, and we're shooting it in Spain. And apparently every human being in Spain smokes cigarettes. I don't care if you're that. If you can look over the counter, you can buy cigarettes, right? So they didn't need a fog machine because there was so much smoke of people just smoking all the time. And then the British cast, they all smoke. I was the only one that didn't smoke on the whole thing. And we did all the lines and everything like this, and it was, you know, the British girls had to fake an American accent, you know, and everything like that. We got the movie back, and all of a sudden, my first line was, hey, make a left here. And it was, hey, make a left here. And I went, that's not my voice. They had overdubbed it in broken English so that it sounded like a Spanish guy trying to speak English. And they overdubbed all the English parts in broken English. I went, why would they do that? You know, and then they released it everywhere. You know, so if you go into back in the Blockbuster and it says 25 biggest turkeys of all time, I'm in 3 of them. Monster Dog, Sergeant Pepper, and what was the other one that I was in? I was in another one that was just horrific. But anyways, you know, those were 2 certified ones that I was in. And then some people love that movie. They just look at it and they say, I love that film. That's, you know.
Can you talk about meeting John Carpenter for the first time at and the whole Wrestlemania experience?
Well, the Wrestlemania thing, yeah, that's how we met and everything. But I knew John Carpenter, you know, for his filmmaking. You know, who didn't know John Carpenter? That was, you know, not only did he direct and write, but he did that great music. You know, for Halloween, that's one of the great themes of all time. That music was. I didn't have any idea what he was about. Didn't have any idea to this day why he was so into the wrestling thing. You know, I think we met at the WrestleMania 3, was it, in Detroit? Yeah. And so, I mean, it was like, you know, a classic thing. And then my manager started making horror movies. My manager's never seen any of his own movies. He produces them, but he hates horror movies. But he did They Live. He did People Under the Stairs. What was the other one? Shocker with Wes Craven, and a whole bunch of these movies. And Prince of Darkness, we met, you know, John Carpenter. And I asked John, I said, hey, I want to come down and watch you film. That was really how it started. They were going to shoot this scene with this hand coming through the mirror. And I said, I want to see how you do that. So I came down to LA, you know, where they were shooting it. And there we had a thing of mercury, pool of mercury where the hand was coming out and everything. That's great. And he says, you know, we have this scene with these sort of street people that are zombie-ish. They're kind of like in this. He said, it'd be great if you were just sort of in that crowd, you know. And I went, oh, okay, that'd be fun, you know. Put this stocking cap on and I'll just kind of be little guys. And they pan it and everything. And he says, you know, the street people don't have a leader. You know, it'd be great if you were kind of like the leader of this. Just, you know, a couple of face shots here and there. And okay, great. So he came and saw our show, and there's a part in our show where I take the mic stand and I shove it through a guy's chest, and it comes out the back to him over there. And he loved that, the fact that it was a great trick. You know, you put it in and it had a CO2 cartridge that blew blood out, and the thing was on a spring. And it looked really real. And he goes, you know that mic stand thing? Yeah. He says, do you think you put a bicycle through a guy's chest? I said, sure, we could rig that, you know. So next thing I know, now I'm killing somebody in the movie. So every day it got to be another scene, you know. Pretty soon I got the DVD and I'm the cover. You know, I'm the guy with the hat on there, you know. I didn't have one line in the whole movie, which was great, you know. But it was really fun to shoot it, and to me, it was a feather in my hat that I was in a John Carpenter movie. You know, to me, that was really a very important thing, still is. You know, I can say I was actually in a John Carpenter film, and I got to be the killer, you know, in one of the scenes. I really thought that out of all the slasher movies, the very first Halloween was the benchmark. The scene where she kills him, puts the knitting needle through his ear, and she's calling, and he sits up. It's the first time you realize you can't kill him. And I went, oh no. And that's when everybody in the theater went, oh. And he looks at her like this. And, you know, and the great thing about that character, and that was before Jason, when you have that white mask on, there's no emotion. So this was just a killer that had no emotion to what he was doing. To him, it was just natural to do. It didn't even faze him. That's what's scary. If you see a guy that's doing this, you go, oh, you can relate to that. You can't relate to a guy just going and pinning a guy to the wall with a butcher knife and then just kind of looking at his work and then walking away with no emotion. The trick to that mask was the fact that was the terrifying part. There was zero emotion to what was going on underneath that, you know. And that's what I told him. I said, to me, that's the beginning of a whole new thing. That you can make that character go on forever because you can't figure him out. You can't figure out what makes him tick. You know, as much as Donald Pleasance was trying to explain him, you still, to the audience, you're going, what do you mean you can't kill him? What do you mean he is the boogeyman? They must have had a past, but you never explained that. You know. So I was very taken by the idea, and then you put the music on top of it. The dun 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 dun. I mean, I don't think you could get any better than that. I don't think there's ever been a slasher movie better than the original Halloween.
Yeah, as someone who's created a character that's been so thoroughly explored over the years, what was it like watching John interact with actors in the creation of Prince of Darkness as a creator himself of such things?
Well, I think the actors have got to understand that the director's got a vision in his head. He's got a sense of boundaries, where if you walk outside that boundary, you blow the overall thing. If one guy's too funny, he pulls the scene his way. If this guy, in other words, he can be funny, but not too funny. The girl could be terrified, but not too terrified. She can, so you have to pull out that in the actor, and the director's the only one that knows how much degree before, an actress might take a take and she goes, oh, that was the best take I ever took in my life. And he goes, no. On film, what I got on film, you totally distracted from what I was trying to get. Take it down 2 notches. And to an actor, they don't get that. They say, I just got it. And you go, no, you didn't quite get it. Take it down 2 notches because it's not going to play with what's going on. So a director has to know all that stuff. And that's what probably drives directors crazy, because they can't explain to the bosses why he's using this person or that person. But we want to use Brad Pitt in that part. And you go, no. Brad Pitt in that part changes everything. We need somebody that nobody's ever seen before in that part. And a director has to be the guy that he's the only guy on the planet that knows what he wants to see on that film. And if it works, he's the genius. If it doesn't work, it really is his responsibility because he let somebody change it. So when you get a director that really wrote the movie, wrote the story, directing the story, the only guy he has to worry about is the producer's not getting in the way. There's always the producer that says, well, my cousin wants to be in the movie. And you sit there going, I know Rob Zombie told me, he says, you have to promise me one thing. I said, what? And he says, you'll never direct. And I said, why? He says, it's the most disappointing thing on the planet. What you see, what you want to see on film is never going to be what you see because there's too much interference coming in. There's too many people that want the movie to do this, to do that. He says, unless you can afford to do everything, to produce the movie, to put all the money up, then you can do your own movie. He said, but until that happens, you can't really do it,
How was John on set?
John was great. John was one of those guys I think everybody had no problem with at all. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say a bad word about working with John. He's like, Tim Burton is like that too. Tim Burton is, we did this thing with Dark Shadows, and Tim is just having so much fun on the set. He kind of builds the set, knows what he wants, and he has fun with it. And Johnny has fun with it. And him and Johnny got this great communication going on, but he doesn't overthink it, or he doesn't overdo it. And if something accidentally great happens, he leaves that in. A perfect example, they both wanted me to do Dwight Fry, Ballad of Dwight Fry, which was, when they were kids, their favorite Alice Cooper creepy song. So I went, okay. I said, I don't know how that fits in the story. And he said, I'll make it fit. So he writes a scene into the movie where the girl that's the guardian of the babysitter at one point was in a straitjacket. And in my thing, I'm wearing the straitjacket. So that's how he connected it all up. And I thought that was really brilliant. He wants that song. And the way he gets that song in is to add this, write that scene, and make it work. That's great. In other words, if it's not there, build it in.
Did you have any input into the look and behavior of your character in Prince of Darkness, or did he just go do whatever you want?
No, he just, he says, whatever, he says, I want you to look like a street guy. I think he wanted just flat white makeup, kind of caked. So I looked like I was 75 years old, and, kind of like just blanched out and motionless, just, dead. And that was the whole idea, is that all these people on the street were pretty much brain dead. They were following whatever the thing wanted them to do, so they didn't really have any say in it. Putting the bicycle through the guy's chest, well, the voices told him to do that, so, he didn't probably think about it too much.
It's not that dissimilar from Michael Myers.
Yeah, I think, again, that's him. And again, there's something so scary about that. It's sociopathic, when you don't have any regard for the person's pain or death. You have a sociopathic killer that just doesn't see anything that's wrong with that at all. Unfortunately, there are people out there that are sociopathic, and that's scary.
You talked about your experience seeing Monster Dog for the first time. What was it like seeing Prince of Darkness? Were you at the premiere?
Oh yeah, we went to the whole thing. It was great because I was in a John Carpenter movie, and it was I was glad that there was no dialogue. Giving that character dialogue would have ruined it, because he was just a tool. He was just a tool. He had nothing to say about what he was doing. He could care less, left or right. If I'm supposed to put a bike through this guy's chest, then okay, But believe me, I bragged about that for quite a long time. Still do.
What do you attribute the film's enduring popularity to fans to?
How many films become cult films? Not many. Not many. Airplane, Caddyshack, where you can put the movie on Princess Bride. You can put the movie on anywhere in the movie and watch it through, right there. Somehow Prince of Darkness attained that. And I don't think there's any way of explaining why. Alien is like that. I could put on Alien anytime, anywhere in the movie and just watch it from there and be very satisfied with it. That doesn't happen. I don't know if it's the pace of the editing or the characters. You can pick up any character at any time and go with it all the way through, even though you know the ending. It's just achieved that cult status. Not necessarily a huge box office hit, but that didn't matter. It was one of those movies that everybody knew about,
And what are
I don't think you can plan those. Yeah, I don't think you can plan it. They just happen,
I got that.
Let's start over on. I'm kidding. Just the mic.
Okay, we had a good rehearsal.
I'm gonna roll on this now.
And it almost took me right over through the back, and it was impossible to not look awkward. But they got it. They got it from the right angle. So,
have you seen the film?
There's this one scene where she says, "I don't see a car," and I said, "Well, I have my own means of transportation. These big black wings come up like angel wings." And she goes, "Oh no!" But anyway, the kid that played Mother, the red, he was scary as hell.
Really?
I mean, he was as a vampire.
Oh yeah.
Really
he kind of reminded me of Carrot Top a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, he was so condescending, and everything like this. And
I wonder how he entranced her when they're when he's on the couch and welcoming her in. That's another 360 shot.
Yeah, right. And she ended up on Mad Men now. She's
is she?
Hooray. Yeah.
Wow.
She's the hottest new thing on TV.
That's cool.
But everybody in the cast was great.
I've been waiting for him to do something else. It seemed like he had so much momentum, and then.
And I see it on HBO all the time and Showtime, so that movie did okay.
Yeah.
And it was a very funny movie.
Yeah.
There was some fun. My favorite scene was when she goes into a 7-Eleven. She's a vampire, right? And the guy from behind, he's going, "Hey, baby, this guy." The next thing you see is there's a straw in his throat. And she's sucking out of his throat with a straw, like a 7-Eleven straw. And her bass player comes around the corner. She goes, "It's not what it looks like." What else could it be?
Oh, it's so good.
Drinking his blood through a straw.
That's brilliant.
But it was, and having Malcolm McDowell in the movie was great too.
Yeah.
He's really a kick. He's a lot of fun.
Well, they put a bunch of music. He put what's his name? Alex from Rush is in there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Iggy was in it.
And,
what's his name?
Henry Rollins.
Henry Rollins.
Yep.
There was a bunch of rockers in there. Moby.
Oh yeah, which you wouldn't even know.
Meat.
You hardly know.
He was a punk rock singer that was just like covered in blood. His name was Meat.
Yeah.
You know, Moby, who was like never been that close to any meat in his life.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It was great. The casting was really good in it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's this one scene where they said, "But we killed the vampire," and I go, "No." He said, "You killed, you killed that vampire, but I'm from a much older breed than him." You know.
So you got to play your Dracula.
Yeah, I got to play my Dracula part.
You got to do that.
Cool. And Calico was in it. Calico, my daughter, who wrote Screeching, was the waitress.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Can we roll again?
Yeah, go ahead and roll. We'll just do a couple
Camera
more.
speeds.
Action. So, since Prince of Darkness, you've done a number of other films as well, and one of them, that if you could just briefly talk about your experience on the film Suck.
Suck was really a fun little movie that we read, and I said, "This is really funny," and and he did some very creative things with that movie, and he wrote great songs. I mean, he wrote some really, really good songs. The idea that here's a little rock band that can't make it doing anything, the girl becomes a vampire, and all of a sudden she goes from being mousy to really hot, and suddenly there's a different look, on stage, and the guys are kind of looking at her because she's now, and of course she turns everybody else into a vampire in the band, and now they're floating when they're playing their lead guitars, and they are vampires. And how do they get out of it now? And and it was filled with rock stars, but the script was funny. And the script, I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, I'd love to play this main," because you don't find out that I am the old vampire, the king vampire till the very, very end. I'm just a bartender in the movie till the very end, and he did a great job. And I tell you, he should do more. In fact, they could do part 2 of that, because the last thing is, let's put the band back together. I know a good drummer.
I always thought they would. I always thought that there would be a sequel.
For me, the nice thing about that was I didn't have to play Alice Cooper. I got to be another character, and there was a lot of dialogue, which I really enjoyed. The fact that he and I did a lot of dialogue together, and so I actually got to act. It wasn't just Alice playing Alice, It was playing a character that was, to me, that's always the most fun thing. I always tell them, when they're going to put me in a movie, I said, make me the preacher, make me the father, make me something other than this. But I always end up getting the villain role, which is okay. I just got a script of sci-fi flick where I play the 3rd fastest gun in the West, but it takes place, it just keeps time jumping. It's like a shootout scene, Clint Eastwood's shootout scene, but it's in a 1900 British village, where people are playing soccer and cricket and things. It's so out of whack, But that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, something like that.
Well, you were Billy the Kid in the music video for Monster Dog.
Right. In Monster Dog, we went a whole bunch of different directions in that.
Yeah.
I was James Bond, I was Jack the Ripper, I was,
You were also Freddy's dad.
Freddy's dad was fun. That was fun because, and that's when I firmly got the idea that shooting the scariest scene in the movie is usually the funniest and the hardest to shoot, because the absurdity of it. He's going to put a straight razor through my eye in 3D. And he would just get ready to do it, and he would start laughing, and then of course that gets infectious, It's really hard to hold a straight face when a guy's going to put a straight razor through your eye, But I got to play this real, this really horrific father, drunk Southern, boy, that kind of thing, and I was just sweating and food and everything, So that was great. That was fun to do, Give me more of those.
You were Alice Cooper in Bigfoot.
Bigfoot was great. Now I'll tell you why I did Bigfoot. The production on that, it probably cost $200, the whole thing. they did a series of movies on sci-fi movies. I watch Sci-Fi Channel every day. Ghost Hunters is my favorite thing in the world. I'm addicted to Ghost Hunters. But every Saturday, it's Dino Croc versus Sharktopus, and I'm going, I love these. These are so good. They're so over the top. They make these in 2 weeks, and I'm addicted to them. Then they started putting rock stars in the movies to get killed. And I kind of went, I'd like to do that. I want to be in one of these movies that I watch every Saturday. And they had one of the guys, the Partridge Family, getting killed, and this and that, and Danny Bonaducci, and all this. And I said, what happens? And they said, well, you do a scene with Danny Bonaducci. And I said, well, that's funny already. I said, where you're kind of scolding him, because he's the promoter. He's a scumbag, that promoter that lies to you and tells you Sting's going to be there and all that. And you show up, and there's 300 people at the concert, but you still got to go on. So you go on, and they said, and then Bigfoot bites you in half. And I went, oh, I'm in. Especially if it's really crappy, if it looks really, So, yeah, I flew up to Seattle. We shot it in one afternoon, and it was great. I had a great time doing it, And when I watched it, I went, yes, great. And I think the next week, Debbie Gibson got eaten by a half parrot, half a weasel or something, And to me, I said, keep doing that. And I said, every rock star I know would love to be killed in one of your movies. And I said, it's a great little gimmick.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is Prince of Darkness touches on some similar things to The Exorcist that you talk about as being such a benchmark. And a lot of that is the fear built into religion.
Yes.
And all of that. Can you talk about why that works on film so well?
Well, I think that he had to have a device. You couldn't just have the threat of the devil. His device, the green bubbling thing, was the focal point of this evil. And you didn't know what it was going to do. You didn't know why it was the focal point. It was trapped in this green stuff, And but it went back to the oldest evil of all time. Went back to Satan. And all these scientists, of course, didn't believe in Satan. They're much too smart for that. They're much too intelligent to believe in anything as ancient as the Bible, whereas the Bible comes out being the truth, in the whole thing. From a Christian point of view, and I'm Christian, a lot of my songs are very, very pointed to don't be fooled by Satan's greatest trick is to get you to believe he doesn't exist. So I said, that's what this thing's all about, is the whole thing that, oh, you can't believe in that. That's so uncool. But there he is. Evil has to come from some place. It has to have an origin, and he is the origin. Consequently, if you believe in Satan, you can't be an atheist then, because you have to believe in God. To me, it's the other way around. People believe in God but don't believe in Satan, and I go, then you're only believing parts of the Bible that you like. You have to believe the whole thing. If you believe one word, you have to believe all of it. So it did have religious background. I don't know John's religious background at all, but I think we all have it. We're born with a knowledge of God and a knowledge of Satan. We deny it. We try to wash it away with this. We try to pretend like we're really smart and we're scientists and we're much smarter than that. In the end, it all comes back to that: good and evil, God, Satan. Every single thing that's ever been written had to have a hero and a villain, but that started in the Bible. And that's why when Satan comes along in this thing, again, he's not science's friend. He's the adversary. So I think John went to the ultimate villain on this thing. Rather than creating some new villain, he just went to the ultimate villain.
here. This was the discussion that was recorded, as I mentioned earlier, for the Friday the 13th box set, which came out from Scream Factory, I think a couple years ago now. Of course, the whole thing couldn't be featured on that release, and this is the uncut audio from it. We talk about his love for Jason, his love for different horror villains, and how he views himself as kind of maybe a side compatriot in that realm as his character of Alice Cooper. And then we also get into discussion of the video for He's Back, The Man Behind the Mask, and what an adventure that was for him. So here we go. Alice on Friday the 13th. When did Jason Lives first enter the picture for you?
Well, when that whole, when the whole slasher movie thing started, that was a perfect time for Alice to reemerge. It just so happened that all happened right when Alice was coming out, was coming back. The Nightmare Returns. Kane Roberts and myself, we wrote Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell, and all we did was watch slasher movies. So all of the songs were all very, very influenced by that. It was the albums were almost soundtracks for different slasher movies, and that's what I wanted. I wanted Alice to emerge as that. If you're going to be a villain, represent all of that, And so when Man Behind the Mask came along, of course, Jason. We watched every Nightmare on Elm Street, and we watched. In fact, I was Freddy's father in one of them, and they asked me to do the music for the one, and I went, well, of course, I'd love to do the music for that one. And we wrote, Hard Rock Summer, and we wrote Man Behind the Mask. And the odd thing was, I wrote Man Behind the Mask with Kane, and then we took it to Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly wrote Like a Virgin, and he wrote a lot of Madonna stuff. And I said, okay, take this horrific piece of work that we have here, that's sort of like little storyline about the lake and everything, and just give it some bounce. Give it something that's not. I want it to go. I want it to bounce, and dance a little bit, and that's what he did. He brought that all into it, and that became a huge hit in Europe. I mean, they were playing it in discos, which was the weirdest thing, because the song was, you're with your baby and you're, the lyrics were just totally a horror movie. Yeah. And yet you could dance to it.
Right. Yeah. So at the point where you were doing this, had Constrictor been finished by then, or were you in the midst of it?
Yeah, we did a different version of Man Behind the Mask. There were two versions of it. Right. There was one that was a metal kind of version, and then there was this version. And we knew that the movie wanted something more summer, danceable. We knew what was going on in the music business right then, and we said, sure. As long as the storyline's there, and the Alice touch is there, and the Alice lyric is there, and the Alice snarl is in there, I don't care if it bounces. Yeah. I want it to bounce. Because that's even more of a juxtaposition, a strange juxtaposition, that you've got Alice with this kind of dance feel to it, Right.
What drew you to the Friday the 13th series?
Well, Jason and Michael Myers, they were the two boogeymen. Well, and you put, of course, Freddy in there. So they were the new Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman. They were the new versions of that. They were all the boogeymen. They all lived under your bed, and they were easy to relate to. I think the thing that made Michael Myers and Jason scarier than Freddy was a stand-up comedian. I mean, Freddy had as many one-liners as James Bond did after he killed somebody, Yeah. But Jason and Michael Myers had no emotion. Zero emotion. He would stab a guy and pin him to the thing and then admire his work, kind of look at it, and with absolutely no emotion to it at all. That makes it scary. Yeah. If he would have growled and but he never did. Yeah. It was just straight out, you're dead, you're dying, and I could care less. That's what they did. They were killing machines. Yeah. And they couldn't die. which
Right.
made it even more, So they were the three new monsters for that generation. And very cleverly done. Very cleverly. Well, who's getting killed? Every kid in high school that you hated.
Right.
If you really look at it, it's the cheerleader, it's the football guy, it's the guy that had all the chicks, it's the idiot. All of them are going to get killed. And you kind of went, every one of those kids I hated in high school. So Jason and Michael were all doing all this for us. They were getting rid of those kids for us.
Doing your dirty work.
Maybe I saw it a different way, but I started really realizing every one of the kids that got killed was somebody, I'd kill them.
How would you compare Jason and the character of Alice?
Well, Alice was much more vaudeville. Alice didn't mind. I loved building Alice up to this horrific thing, and then I don't mind Alice slipping on a banana peel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind a little slapstick in it because it's great when you see a horrific monster blow it.
Yeah.
You believe in him, you believe in him, you believe in him, and then he does something really stupid,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to regain his composure.
Yeah.
To the thing. So I always kind of allowed Alice a pratfall once in a while, where he really looked like an idiot on stage.
Yeah.
And then he had to regain it, And at the end, I let the audience in on it, hit down School's Out.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the show, with the white top hat and tails. After it's all done, it's like vaudeville.
Yeah.
It's like, you survived the show. So now you get to see the real me with the white top hat and tails.
What about the villain part of Alice, though? The darkness in him, the part of him that's grabbing the doll and all the the violent stuff that you're doing on stage.
There were some surprising moments for myself when I would, like on Nightmare, Welcome to My Nightmare, and some of the shows, songs like Wind Up Toy and songs like The Quiet Room, where I just went, let's see where this goes. It's just a cold spot on Alice.
Yeah.
And he's in a straitjacket. And all of the glitz and glamour's gone. And now it's just this really, claustrophobic moment where he's singing and you could see him trying to get out. And then finally when he breaks out, there's this, and he's out. And then they look over and there's the nurse and you go, oh no. Because he takes the straitjacket and he wraps it into and he's behind the nurse and the audience is going, of course he's going to kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah, the nurse was always my wife, which was great.
Right.
Cheryl played a great nurse Rosetta. But there were moments there in that where I really enjoyed the stage acting part of it. It went beyond the rock and roll thing. It really went into it more of a, if I were acting in a movie, how would I play this? And I would let that character really go insane. So quietly you'd see him really losing it.
Yeah.
And then finally when he breaks out, there's this, cinematic moment, with the audience, So I try to take the audience through a bunch of different emotions. First of all, it's a big rock star, but he's this dark thing, and then it gets theatrical, and then at the end he's like reemerged as Mr. Showbiz.
Right. Yeah. Tell me about the process of planning for the music video, because you're rare in Friday the 13th lore in that you're really the only outside story that exists, but kind of is in that universe there. Tell me about planning that music video.
Well, it was pretty. You see how the movies are done. It's certainly a formula. Those movies are formulated, and there's a formula, and you kind of minimize and do a minimum version of that formula in your video.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of use the same formula, and because it connects, you don't want it so far away that it doesn't connect to the movie.
Right.
But still, you have to be Alice. You can't be Jason.
Right.
You can be Alice. And so there's that fine line, and really the director doesn't know where that line is. The only two people that know where that line is are myself and Bob Ezrin. the producer, our producer. He is the only one that knows right when I should go, when I should crack, when I should go. He's so close to the character because we created the character in the studio, and we both know what makes him laugh and what makes him tick and what he would say, what he wouldn't say. Would he do this or would he wait for a second and then do this?
Yeah.
That Bob knows that as well as I know that. And so really there was no, you have to leave a certain amount of that to improvisation to see what was going to happen. On a video now, you only have 3 minutes, and you know how it's shot, MTV style.
Yeah.
All flashes and flashes and flashes.
Right.
So you have to work all around that, and like everybody else, in that era, we were all feeling our way through this video stuff. Nobody had done it video before, so we were kind of feeling our way. You had to really kind of trust your director, to get what you were trying to get, But we had a lot of conversations, on things. I'd say, where you go, I go, no. Alice would never do that. Alice would do this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The elaborate staging and the set dressing from it, how much of that came from you and how much of it did they bring into it? Because it seemed like it may have even had some elements from the Constrictor Tour set that were incorporated.
A lot of it was homemade. A lot of it was Alice Cooper homemade show, and I don't think they wanted to lose that. They didn't want to lose that energy that Alice brings, that the Alice show brings to it. Just now you're putting it on a little screen.
Right.
So it suddenly takes it's a different size now, I think the elements were all there, and I think it was, but I think the director leaned more, let us lean more towards our stage show, and a lot of it, and then would say, okay, but now we really have to, we have to pop this and pop that and make this go and make this work for the MTV audience, not necessarily the Alice audience. So let's give Alice this much, and let's give the audience this much. A little bit of give and take on that.
You also had C.J. Graham come in for at least a day, some part of this, who played Jason in the film as well. Can you talk about working with C.J.?
C.J. and I do a lot of Comic-Cons together.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We probably sit next to each other a whole bunch, and there's a bunch of pictures of him and I. We were cover of Fangoria and Monster Magazine, with the whole thing. And so that picture we've signed a million times. I sign the one side and he signs the other side, So CJ was great, and Kane, hotter, he's a guy that's always at the Comic-Cons.
Yep.
And those guys, we know all those guys. It's really a great little fraternity.
Yeah.
Wes, was great, and all the directors were all kind of buddies. And I really liked that era of filmmaking because, you had some really, Tobe Hooper, one of the really great directors.
Yeah.
That guy was, Salem's Lot was one of the scariest movies I think I ever saw. I can picture 5 or 6 scenes in that movie that were as good as anything I've ever seen in any movie. When you first see Barlow, the very first time you see Barlow, took my breath away. I went, what? I didn't know what Barlow was going to be until that, and that was a personification of evil.
Right.
That was just scary. My daughter ran into the wall. She was 5, and she was sitting there watching, and all of a sudden he comes on, and she runs right into the wall. I always tell people Salem's Lot with David Soul is one of the top 3 horror movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that when we did the Fangoria article all those years ago. The first time.
And people don't know the movie. And then they remade the movie with Rob Lowe and Rutger Hauer, and they had enough nerve to put Rutger Hauer in a cape.
Yeah.
And they made him look real handsome and everything. And you sat there and go, oh, what are you doing? How could you ruin this movie?
You talk about this little club that you're a part of, and you're also part of a small club of people who have done several things. One, worn the mask. In the music video, you're donning the mask and in that great photo shoot. Was that a moment for you to put that mask on?
Yeah, well, first of all, they let me. I understand the fraternity there, the guys, that they have had the mask on. and the fact that I was included was yeah, it was like being part of the gang. It was like graduating.
Yeah.
They thought I was worthy to wear the mask.
Yeah.
And you know, you find that most of these guys, the actors, are all rock guys. You know, they wanted to know if, hey, did you ever meet Jim Morrison? You know,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
what's Keith Richards like? You know, and that kind of thing. And I'm asking them questions about, you know, all the film stuff, and they want to know, you know, hey, did you ever were you ever on stage with, you know, blah blah blah, or Arthur Brown, or any of these, you know?
Yeah.
Almost every actor and almost every sports guy I ever met, they always want to know, hey, what was it like being with?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that you got to do is the famous KKK, ma, ma, ma.
Yeah.
From the, yeah, yeah. Could you do that for me?
Yes, it was just kill. And we do that on stage when we do the song.
Yeah.
You know, and Tommy, my guitar player, and the audience, they go like that when they hear that, because it's so authentic, you know. And that was such a great authentic thing in that movie, you know, that was really that creeped you out so much, you know. That and the theme from Halloween were those two things were the things that stuck with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When people first touch a piano, no matter how old they are, you know.
Well, I tell people this great story, and it's a true story. I took my kids out for Halloween, and it was the year that came out, right? And so, you know, they go running up to the door, and I dressed like Michael Myers, but I had a little tape recorder, right? And the kids would run away to the next house, and I would just stand there and look at the house. And then I would hit the thing, and I go ding 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 ding, dun dun, and then the guy would go bye.
You're still there.
And I would stand there way too long, you know, just enough long where it was like, it got very nervous.
Tell me about shooting the wraparound segment, because this really does. You already had a song that told a story. In the video, there's the wraparound with you and the kid, and you're the sort of reveal behind the desk. It's you have that. Was that your idea to bring that into it, or whose concept was the wraparound?
Yeah, that was. Well, I think it was the director's also. You know, and he said that we have to make it a package. You know, and I totally understood that. And you know, I mean, first of all, there's no rules in a video.
Right.
You don't really have any rules, as long as you get the point across. You get the point across. Most videos of that time was how many girls could you get in the video that with as little clothes on as possible.
Yep.
That was the Motley Crue and the, you know, Bon Jovi and all that, you know, stuff. This was totally different than that.
You had lots of girls in the video, but they were in cages and they had wings and.
Yeah. It just that, you know, and that was so much a part of it. You had to have that in the video.
Yeah.
To get it on MTV, you know. And I said, well, could they be decapitated, or could they be like one arm? And they said, no, you know, it has to have some kind of a sexual appeal, you know, to it. And I said, well, I don't want any naked girls in the picture. Right. I said, that's not the idea. I said, I don't mind as long as it's done and it doesn't look like, again, it didn't look like your everyday MTV video.
Right. Yeah.
But you still had to kind of live in that world. You couldn't, you couldn't live in this other world that you're bringing in, or they'd never get played.
Yeah.
It's like a song. Yeah. If we did the original Man Behind the Mask, it never would have got played. But adding the Tom Kelly part turned it into something that could get on the radio. In fact, the song was a hit in Finland, #1 in Finland and Sweden. The movie was never allowed to play there.
Oh.
They never allowed slasher movies. Splatter movies were not allowed in Europe. When I came over there, I'd come over there with like 20 different movies, and a lot of times I'd go through, and they'd go, "No, we can't bring these in."
Wow.
They would take movies away.
Wow.
Yeah. So the song was a hit, and everybody couldn't wait to see the movie because they saw the video and they went, well, is this what the movie's like? And I went, movie's a lot darker than this.
So what happened to Hard Rock Summer? Why did it not end up on Constrictor?
It was just, we wrote it it was too happy. It was really too happy. It was, we wanted a song that set up that it's summer. Hard rock, summer in the U.S., hard rock. And we said, Kane and I wrote this great Beach Boys song.
Yeah, you did. Totally.
Yeah. And it was supposed to set up what was going to happen after that.
Yeah.
All this happiness was going to certainly turn into something else.
Right.
So when we played it back, we listened to it, we went, we cannot put this on Constrictor. Constrictor's got such a great feel to it. This would totally kill it. But we knew there would be a greatest hits album. We knew there would be a sort of an oddity album box set, and it'll make it there. And on top of it, collectors love that. Collectors love it when there's a song that they can't get. They have to find it. And then once they get it, that is their prized possession. Yeah. Because, hey, I've got Hard Rock Summer. Yeah. In fact, two of the songs in Monster Dog were like the most popular songs on the box set because you couldn't get it anywhere else except the box set.
Jack the Ripper.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm James Bond. Sometimes I'm Billy the Kid.
So great, man. That, as a quick aside before we wrap it up with the final question here, Hard Rock Summer, we're talking about lost gems here. Is there anything from your catalog, a song that you love, that you just, with all of yourself, wish you could play it live, but it just never plugged into an audience? Do you have a song like that?
Exactly. Generation Landslide. Generation Landslide is one of those songs that I can sit back and say that might be the best lyrics I've ever written. And everybody goes, oh man, how come you never play that on stage, man? And we said, okay, we'll play it. We play it in front of an audience and nothing. We get this. What? And I went, it's my favorite song. It's my favorite song on $1 Billion Babies. I mean, it's the best lyrics, harmonica solo, all this great stuff, and it dies on stage. Yeah. And then we do songs that, that were just kind of like, that work like crazy on stage. Yeah. That they can't get enough of. Yeah. So,
Oh, that's great. So you've been a part of so many horror films, key franchises. You've played the devil. I remember we once talked about you being in Suck, in Rob Stefaniuk's film Suck and all this.
That was so much fun.
What horror goals do you have left?
The horror genre is, it can get so dark. I stay away from satanic things. I really kind of stay away from anything satanic. I find now that I'm more interested now in sci-fi. I find that sci-fi movies are a little more, there's more places to go. Yeah. In sci-fi than there are in horror. There's only so much. I never liked torture movies. Yeah. I never really went for the movies where the guy is, got the girl in the shack and he's, because he wasn't a monster. There was nothing ethereal about this guy at all. He was just a maniac. So I always went, but when you had something where I went, wait a minute, what? What was that? It's something that gets me. That's why Alien is so good. Yeah. The movie Alien is so good because first of all, it was, whoever edited that movie was brilliant. And also the shooting of it, the whole idea of that, it could happen when you think of it. All of the Jason movies and all the Michael Myers movies, all that stuff, you can go boogeyman. Yeah, boogeyman. Why is The Exorcist so scary? Because it could happen. It's been documented. Demon possession especially a little girl that turns into this thing that you just want to kill because it's so evil. That movie scared everybody to death because it didn't speak to your intellect. It spoke to your soul. And that made it even scarier. So same thing with Alien. We don't know what's out there. And the alien was just so, there was no redeeming qualities of this character at all.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it had a personality.
Yeah.
You could see that it had a personality. And I mean, that made that movie so good. And part 2 was actually as good as the first one, I thought.
Yeah, a rare case, right, where that happens.
Yeah, a rare case where that happens, where part 2 was as good. And I think Halloween part 2 was pretty good too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Alice, thank you so much. I know you're super busy, and I hope that you can get back on the road soon. And I wish you all the best with the new album.
No, wait, every rock band is like racehorses at the starting gate.
Yeah.
When January 1st comes along, I think they're going to give everybody the green light, and every band's going to be on tour.
Tour buses all over the highways. Yeah.
Everywhere. It's going to be like wrecking into each other.
Well, it's a pleasure as always, and I wish you guys all the best and good health and everything moving through the rest of this
Thanks
time.
a lot. We'll talk again.
And to bookend the discussion on Friday the 13th, Jason Lives, here is music video director Jeffrey Abelson talking about his time working on that very, very important video with Alice, with the Friday the 13th camp. They built a really wild set for this thing, and it was a big moment for Jeffrey in the midst of what were so many big moments at that time. If you look him up, you're going to see it's a real who's who of music greats, especially in the 80s, where he was really a true pioneer in the realm of music videos, something Alice was certainly no stranger to by the time their paths crossed for this project. It's really interesting to get this perspective from someone because the world of music videos isn't often explored very much, and it's a tremendous honor to have had this conversation with Jeffrey. So Jeffrey Abelson on Alice Cooper, and he's back, the man behind the mask. Friday the 13th, Jason Lives.
I was friendly with Shep Gordon, Alice's manager, and Shep was very familiar with my work. So when the deal was made for Alice to provide songs to the movie, and talk naturally turned to doing a video, I got a call from Shep asking me if I wanted to do it. I then did some brainstorming with a great conceptualist named Keith Williams, who I'd worked with on several previous pieces, like the Billy Idol, Dancing with Myself, and Phil Collins' Against All Odds, and Ghostbusters. Anyway, Keith loved horror films, and he'd seen all the Friday the 13th pics, so it only took a day or two for him to come up with a preliminary concept. We then went to lunch with Alice and Shep to discuss it, and it didn't take long for us all to get in sync, and excited to make the first music video for a horror movie. First, after talking with Alice some more, I changed and added to the concept Keith had come up with. But the essential device remained: a teenage couple and a bunch of other kids, most wearing Alice-style makeup, sit in the audience of a movie theater where they've come to see the Jason Lives movie, and where some crazy stuff would happen, which I'll get back to in a minute. But I wanted to set it up with a dialogue scene to bookend the video. And since it was a horror pick, I thought the bookend should be counterpointal, something a little amusing. So I wrote a part for Alice as a prudish parent, giving his kid a hard time about using a car to take his girl to the movies and enjoy the show. Anyway, back in our movie theater, one of the first things the kids see on the movie screen is Jason swinging on a vine toward the camera. Then we cut to Jason tearing a hole in our movie screen, landing inside our movie theater, shocking all the kids. But when he peels off his mask on the song's hook line, it's not Jason, it's Alice, who proceeds to sing to the kids in the audience, alternately freaking them out and amusing them. Then Alice starts beckoning the kid from the opening and his girlfriend to join him, to come through the movie screen and into Alice's music video set, where he proceeds to imprison and terrorize them while the camera pulls back and we get to see the full set for the first time, with all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Eventually the kids escape their prison and jump back through the movie screen into the theater. And then in the end, we see Alice moving around inside our movie theater again, only to be forcibly dragged back into the movie by none other than Jason himself. Then the closing bookend scene where Alice, as the dad, who we only saw from behind in the opening bit, turns around in full makeup and delivers an ominous line to his son. The sets and props were pretty much all the work of our production designer and our art department, working off the concept as it continued to evolve. We shot on a soundstage north of L.A., Valencia, I think, as it was the only space with the size we needed that was available in the time frame we were given. The shoot was only 2 days, even though I wanted 3. There was a whole other element of Alice in Hell that I wanted to shoot, but we couldn't afford it. Alice is really a dream to work with and just to hang out with, man. He's incredibly smart and funny, scary, and an all-around cool dude. And on the set, he's totally disciplined. He even arrived early, very early in the morning, not a common occurrence with rock stars. Yet off-camera, he's cool, calm, and collected, one of the most pleasant artists I ever worked with. I already talked about my writing the bookend. As to the kid I hired to play Alice's son, he was as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in real life as he comes across in character in the video, and he and Alice had an easy rapport. As to Alice as an actor, again, he was a consummate pro. His timing was perfect, line delivery spot on. It was absolutely effortless. Alice, as I'm sure you know, is a big fan of horror movies and was and is a major fan of the Friday the 13th franchise, so yeah, he loved every minute of it. And both he and the whole cast and crew smiled ear to ear when he came on set with the mask. And we all got a big kick out of the shot where he rips it off, revealing Jason as Alice. The expression on Alice's face gets me every time. The only shots we didn't get were those limited by budget, which also affected the matte painting for the scene with the kids walking toward the movie theater and the whole flying through the screen trick. This was back in a time when visual effects, to do those things in a way that I really wanted them done, would have cost too much for our budget. So we did it down and dirty, but it still worked out kind of cool. For all my videos for movies, the selection of film clips was always done to further the story we were trying to tell. But they also had to have an inherent visual element that would allow me to gracefully edit them into the music video. And the content of the movie clips also had to resonate, literally or symbolically, with the lyric. So that took a lot of sorting out. After a while, I'd have a bunch of movie clip candidates, and I'd rough them out in the edit. But then I'd have to massage them quite a bit so they'd work rhythmically with the track as well. It's a lot of work to do right, but it's also a lot of fun. I think I remember the label loving it. The studio, I think, didn't know what to make of it. But MTV thought it was cool, and it brought a smile to the faces of tons of fans over the years, and that's all that matters. Alice is not just a great theatrical performer. He's a great songwriter, and his songs truly stand the test of time. He also assembled a kick-ass rock band of fabulous musicians, so his records were really tight then, and still hold up today. Go listen to School's Out or No More Mr. Nice Guy and tell me they don't get your fists pumping.
And there you have it, the Alice Cooper mega episode of the Radio Hour podcast. So many voices in this thing. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a real 360 perspective on all things Alice. Such an honor to have had these conversations, and I'm just really excited to present them all to you here. Head to justinbeahm.com to keep up to date on all the latest video releases, magazine articles, and interviews that have been happening. And you can always reach me through voicemail or through email on the show. Typically at the end of these episodes, I do have a segment where I'll play voicemails from people, but this one already being so long, I figured you've been through enough of a journey here. But you can always leave a voicemail with questions, comments, feedback, whatever, at 951-357-6955 or by email at radiohourpod@gmail.com. And of course, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and just look for my name, Justin Beahm. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope your October is going beautifully. We will talk to you on the next episode.
You have been listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour. The Radio Hour is a production of Reverend Entertainment, copyright 2024. All rights reserved.